Atop a grand skyscraper, in its vast rooftop hall, 7 people were seated. The transparent floor-to-ceiling windows mirrored the entire city's silhouette. These 7, reclining comfortably on sofas and savoring red wine, were recognizable to anyone who might have been there. They were the revered saviors of the world, the 7 mightiest superpower users of the Superpower Association. This was their meeting place. Bang! The collision of a wine bottle with the tabletop produced a crisp sound. Cheers! The tattoo-covered bald man let out a sardonic snicker. Let's celebrate and thank that existence for giving us the chance to step into a higher sequence. The others shared a subtle smile as they drank their wine, which was as red as blood, in a single gulp. This world should not fall into the hands of the former losers. The truly capable should possess it and make it evident. Past beliefs are all nonsense. We are the true masters of this world. The 7 most powerful superhumans, faces alight with mirth, their eyes filled with malice, and unlike the gentle demeanor on billboards, at this moment, each of them held a scornful view of the multitudes, looking down upon countless ordinary people as mere playthings. This is also the first step for us to re-enter the present world. After all, we have been asleep for far too long. And the blond man suddenly paused. The priest has arrived. Everyone tensed slightly, setting down their wineglasses, each rising to their feet, their faces losing their former expressions, replaced by a degree of wariness and fear. At this moment, their gazes did not turn toward the entrance of the skyscraper but slowly shifted outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. A ripple started to disturb the air. Then, a gaunt figure was slowly revealing itself. This figure, frightfully emaciated, with ghastly wrinkles crisscrossing an ancient, white-haired visage, skin clinging to bone as if it were encased, exuding an extremely feeble breath of life as if it were to collapse the next moment. Of course, this shadow also sat in a wheelchair within 4 hooked up, the liquid being infused seemingly identical to the DX515 potions. Priest. The crowd addressed him with great respect. The white-haired elder slightly lifted his turbid eyes. His voice, raspy as sandpaper, reaching everyone's ears. Sit down. All 7 shuddered and naturally did not dare to sit back on the sofas but instead hurried to pull out chairs next to the conference table. Cough, cough, cough. The white-haired elder let out a series of painful coughs, his body seeming as if it might fall apart at any moment. Yet his wheelchair continued to inch forward to the front of the table. Now, report to me about the current matters. Everyone immediately paused before starting to report each event one by one. After all, the priest's physical condition was visibly weak and critical, most of the time spent in slumber, emerging only occasionally. Of course, one must never assume the priest's strength based on his physical state. All of God's believers followed the same path of God's sequence. The body accounted for only 1% of strength, while ability made up the remaining 99%. Moreover, everything they currently had, status, ability, had been given by this elderly figure. The crowd began to report earnestly, treating each matter with utmost seriousness. Apart from the standard operations of the Superpower Association, which kept darkness well concealed, they knew very well what the priest wanted to hear most. DX515 has made significant progress, and that chaotic entity we traded with the Elder is almost successfully transformed. That liquid is extraordinarily terrifying. It can fuse with any living being to form a symbiont, including active cells, and is even capable of constant transfer and evolution, possessing a fearsome healing ability. This is exactly what everyone in this world lacks. Of course, if it's the true chaotic, the cost is either to become a monster without self-awareness or to become what the Elder spoke of, ghostly chaos followers. In any case, priest, please rest assured, the DX515 potion will likely produce a nearly flawless finished product within the next few days. None wanted to become ghostly chaos followers or monsters. Their physical bodies had always been everyone's weakness, which is why they aimed to develop the DX515 potions, maintaining even a third of their strength, significantly reducing the potion's inherent costs, even if it meant using countless kin from the same world, descendants of numerous years, as test subjects. They resolved to succeed. In doing so, They could not only transform everyone's weaknesses, but the priest before them could also rely on this to fully recover and take complete control of the world, striking a deal with the Abyss Church and stealing the power left by God, splitting the inheritance 70-30. Even if they only had 30%, it was still a vast and terrifying force. With this, they could formally join the Abyss Church, secure in their position amidst chaos, destined for high ranks in the future. "So, where is my old partner?" the elder inquired softly. The group hesitated. The old partner referred to one of God's two priests who operated in the shadows, the secret X organization. "They're well hidden, but we have clues, and with the high-ranking A team of the Superpower Association being ours, we simply await the opportunity to utterly eradicate these remnants. And they are certainly no match for us." The white-haired elder gazed profoundly at the city. Poor loyalists, gasping for breath in some dark corner. They do not understand the changes of the times at all. The entire world's populace is akin to a clan, walking the same sequence path, sharing the same power system. In other words, they are the children of that God, all kin to one another. Unfortunately, they had already rebelled. "So, has the descendant of God been found?" the white-haired priest asked hoarsely. Everyone sank slightly. "Not yet." The elder's fingers tapped lightly on the table surface, not speaking, but everyone felt a terrifyingly lethal, murderous intent. The air around them seemed to be getting compressed. The legs of the entire metal table underwent a subtle deformation. Despite being the strongest group of 7, they heard various stifled moans, their bodies as if under immense pressure, capillaries bursting all over. Their faces had already turned pained, yet they did not dare to breathe heavily. And the white-haired priest's voice came through. "Our worshipped God is grievously injured, frailly asleep in the depths." The white-haired priest softly said, "Only his future descendants can, through the power of their bloodline, locate his coordinates and awaken him. My old companion, along with his subordinates, is still resisting us, quietly searching for this divine son. Could it be you're prepared to let them find him and destroy everything we've worked for?" They had chosen betrayal. They chose to deal with the Abyss Church naturally, at the price of dedicating the God's power, in exchange for the protection of the Abyss, becoming the upper echelon in this chaotic world. Of course, the premise is, the God behind them absolutely must not awaken. Whatever this DX515, whatever fanaticism of the ants of this world, it's all unimportant. The old man's voice was cold. "What I want is to find the divine son, the heir to God. I want him dead." Everyone shuddered, feeling as though they were about to be shattered by some terrible power. "Sir," the blond man hurriedly spoke hoarsely with difficulty. "We have a lead." The elder did not speak, gesturing for the other to continue. Previously, next to a bakery in the main city area, there was a severe collapse, but after investigation, it was likely not a natural collapse, but man-made. We have detected an unusual fluctuation. We suspect it might be a divine power. Upon hearing this, the elder's finger, tapping on the table, came to a halt in midair, and everyone felt the terrible pressure on their bodies ease up. But their hearts did not relax. Because the elder's tone was dangerous. "Suspect," the youth with hedgehog hair stammered to speak. "Because there are too few traces, it's not certain if it's divine." The elder's expression grew cold. But the woman beside him spoke with a trembling voice. "But in today's Superpower Association test, the same fluctuation appeared, and this time there was video." They hurriedly played the projection of the footage at the conference table. In the footage, the building where the test was conducted was in the midst of various tests, a large number of newbies eagerly and worshipfully wanting to join the great Superpower Association. The white-haired elder watched coldly as though observing ants. And then, an unusual power burst within the building, leaves from all the trees in the area falling in large quantities, a scene that even attracted many spectators. Everyone watched this scene nervously. Actually, they had never truly considered the possibility of divinity. But with the priest's rage, They had no choice but to bring up today's incident, hinting it might be divine. Of course, they only felt that someone might have awakened some superpower, causing this fluctuation. But the next moment, the white-haired elder's brow twitched. "Lead the way. I want to see the site for myself." Everyone was taken aback. The priest in front of them never revealed himself in the outer world, and now he actually wanted to visit the site. Could it be? The thing they just casually mentioned actually contained a clue? They did not dare to ask questions. They simply notified the association test site to clear the area. As they headed towards that location, Organization X's people also received relevant messages. Strange. They're being cleared out. And it's a direct order from the Superpower 7. "What do we do, Professor?" In the school of Organization X, the old man watched calmly, his terrifying mind seemingly observing everything. "Do nothing, don't probe, and don't go. That one is also there." The teachers around him tensed, clenching their teeth hard. They already knew who it was. "Take me to the brainwave enhancement room." The elder spoke softly. The teachers shuddered. The professor's ability was the mind. He could sense any being with consciousness and even control it. This was why their Organization X could still secretly expand its operations under the relentless siege of the Superpower Association. And deep within the school, there was a large building where the professor could use the transmitter inside to forcibly elevate his spirit. He could bypass the opponent's probe and remain undetected. Of course, there would be a severe price to pay, given that the professor was already on the brink of death, so he would not activate it lightly. "Professor," the teachers wanted to persuade him, but the elder calmly said, "I have a premonition that something big is about to happen." The fluctuations of the brainwave enhancement room were bridging the spatial distance, sensing all of this. The many teachers, loyal subjects of God, subordinates of the priest department, those within the clan bearing the great mission, they all watched the elder anxiously. After all, such enhanced ability would ultimately exact a toll on the body, and they did not have a potion like the opponent's DX515 which could mitigate the side effects. The elder's complexion grew ever paler, and he began to tremble all over. The faces of the people changed, wanting to switch off the enhancement room, but they were stopped by a mysterious force, making all actions impossible. "It's the professor," he doesn't want to interrupt. What on earth did the professor see? They had no choice but to watch as the elder's trembling became more violent. His blood seemingly drained from his body. Under everyone's worrisome gaze, the enhancement room lights flashed, and a large electric current burst open countless sparks. "Protect the professor." The people swiftly took action, and the next moment, the professor slowly opened his eyes, bleeding from 7 orifices, gasping for breath as though he might pass away at any moment. These old beings who had been sealed, wishing for recovery of their strength, was no easy feat, especially in their world, which possessed fatal drawbacks. And now, the people were too panicked even to use titles, rushing over. "Priest, I'll treat you." But the elder completely ignored his own injuries, his eyes showing shock and fear. He spoke feebly. "Quick! Everyone go and stop them. They have found the Divine Son." Everyone's expressions turned blank again. This news was like a meteor falling into a deep abyss, leaving everyone as if they had been struck by lightning. In the current situation, the Divine Son was their most crucial hope, and the existence they needed to follow, also the most important step in awakening the God they worshipped. But now the enemy had found him first. "These are the coordinates. They are about to head to this place." The elder managed to display the coordinates with the last of his strength. His voice hoarse. "Notify all members of Organization X to go and protect the Divine Son." Without a word, the people immediately sprang into action. And 5 minutes earlier, in the Superpower Association's domain, the white-haired elder's vision filled with various surveillance screens. There were tests for strength, speed, and explosive power. "Is it him?" The blonde man was a bit puzzled. It was when he punched and destroyed the machine that the strange force was detected. Also, the woman looked at the surveillance footage inside the factory. In the footage, Although this figure had hardly moved, how could it escape their astute eyes? All of the chaotic dark ones that brought lethal crises were silently taken care of by him. And there is no trace of chaotic energy absorbed on him. This indicates he suppressed it, which only divinity can do. The white-haired elder listened calmly to their speculations, not daring to confirm as there was no concrete evidence. But for the elder, it was not important, he spoke calmly. Now, let the nearest A-grade squad go to confirm. He stared at the figure wearing sunglasses and strolling leisurely in the control room. Su Buxian. If not, kill them all. If so, menace spread from the elder's eyes. Then it's even simpler. At this moment, the people who were utterly oblivious to the outside world were still in the control room, not yet activating the switch. After all, as long as the gate wasn't triggered, they were still safe. Now, everyone was even more focused on restoring their physical strength. And Su Qi was in no rush. He was quietly infiltrating the enemy's control room using the Super Dream Protocol. To be honest, he was very interested in DX515. Among this group of people, there were geniuses capable of offsetting the cost of chaotic. If the potion DX515 were to be successful, it was actually a good thing, but the process was simply too cruel. Moreover, there were still huge flaws in it, and it was thousands of miles away from success. Su Qi planned to first invade the enemy's database and peruse their years of research material. After all, his other identity was that of the Venerable, and chaotic was the core object of the Venerable. Invasion progress 10%. Invasion progress 20%. Invasion progress 30%. The invasion speed of the Super Dream Protocol was extremely fast. After all, most of its computation power was used to construct various blueprints for the Hustler sect, or for growth and evolution. It wasn't in its prime state now, but even a little effort was enough. Although the enemy system had very strict protection, it took less than 10 minutes to complete the invasion. The entire control room's functions were controlled by the Super Dream Protocol. The gates could also be opened or closed at any moment. Additionally, Su Qi also saw the information about DX515, but it seemed the research part had already been deleted and taken away. This part seemed to connect to another system out in the world. That was a behemoth, and it had a defense 100 times more robust than this place. It seemed that was the heart of the Superpower Association. Sneaking in quietly didn't seem that easy, and it would require some time. But Su Qi also stole something unexpected. Hello! A voice intercepted by the Super Dream Protocol reached Su Qi's ear. It had successfully infiltrated a deep research lab in the outside world. That place was also monitoring them. The voice seemed to be that of a woman's. We only just made contact, didn't we? A young man's voice said calmly. If you expect progress within less than 2 hours, then you might as well kill me. Su Qi recognized this voice. It was the young man who had led them into this research park. Postpone DX515 for now. There's something more urgent. The woman's indifferent voice came through. In your test subjects, there is a suspected presence of the Divine Sun. The young man seemed somewhat shocked, and all the people around suddenly fell silent, as if they had sharply inhaled a breath of cold air. The woman's voice continued. A recent A-grade squad is heading your way. Remember to seal off everything in the vicinity, as we are also preparing. Preparing? The young man's voice was a bit unnatural. The X organization, from which you once defected, seems to have also become aware of this, and there have been significant stirrings, the woman said with a hint of a cold smile. This is a good opportunity to attract them all here and resolve this once and for all. The young man remained silent. I understand. You only have half an hour to transfer the data from the industrial park. Only evacuate the key research personnel for DX515. Ignore the fate of the others. The young man's breathing was steady, but his fists were quietly clenched. I got it. The call ended. Su Qi's eyes moved slightly, and he murmured to himself, It seems something remarkable has happened in the outside world. Su Qi quietly projected the holographic image from the Super Dream Protocol in front of himself, so only he could see the information on it. There was no shortage of related material in that research lab. Superpower Association X organization. And they were indeed earnestly searching for the Divine Son and had discovered Duin. I thought I was the only one who had found the Divine Son. It appears everyone is searching for him. Su Chi shook his head and looked at Duin. Child, you've become the target. I intended to secure the Divine Son to command respect, but it seems the Divine Son has become a target marked for elimination, to the extent they're even neglecting DX-515. The Divine Son appears to be the key to the secrets of this world. The so-called main line, discovering the secrets of the world, means that I need to protect Duin. At this moment, everyone was recovering strength, and a newcomer finally couldn't help but speak up, looking at Su Chi, who always wore sunglasses. That brother Su, you can actually see, can't you? Well, everything in the world is unclear. You think you see, but it's only the surface. What is seen often has countless invisible darkness behind it. Su Chi said gently, just like this factory, like the Superpower Association, the Superpower 7, the same. Everyone was taken aback. They just wanted to ask if the guy could see, whether he was blind or not, but the conversation turned to preaching profound truths, and most importantly, it really hit home. They fell into a slight silence. Su Chi looked around at everyone. Their spirits were quite low. They had rested for so long, and their strength had already recovered, but not one had mentioned leaving. After all, once the gate switch was activated, it would be a gamble of life and death, and from a probability standpoint, it was almost certain death. While there was still a chance to breathe some fresh air, everyone tacitly left it unsaid. Ding! Su Chi looked at the Super Dream Protocol in his line of sight. Data transfer from the target system is in progress. The network protection for the area has been lifted. Invasion speed is increasing. It seemed that the other party was doing exactly as they said, transferring data now, and with this gap, the invasion was rapidly progressing. Ka ka ka. At the same time, the entire third sublevel below suddenly began emanating sounds of gears turning, echoing endlessly in the silent space. What's going on? Everyone looked uneasy. Staying put comes with an idle penalty, see? The NPCs are hurrying us along. Your composition is too complicated, bro. Duin didn't know how to tease Su Chi as he looked toward the distance. The gates around them were loosening, and the monsters inside seemed to be awakening. However, Su Chi still had control for the time being. He directly shut off the power to all the gates that contained dangerous beings, giving time for the invasion to continue. But Su Chi had underestimated the strength of the monsters held back by the gates. Boom! A series of low growls reverberated. Everyone's faces paled as booming impacts exploded throughout the space. What kind of monster is this? It didn't have this power just a minute ago. Su Chi clicked his tongue. The screen in front of him flickered slightly, and the surveillance footage appeared before Su Chi's eyes. The monsters were all covered in black pustules, unrecognizable as human. Each stood 5 meters tall, with an aura similar to what they had seen from the transformed residents in Evil Town. At the same time, Su Chi saw that they were bound by numerous syringes. So that's it. These monsters had been heavily sedated, and tranquilizing potions maintained a constant injection. But whether the potion dosage had just run out, or someone had deliberately stopped the potion input, the monsters were now in revolt. And on the other side of the gates, a massive number of monsters from the second layer amassed, their footsteps a dense murmur. The main gate's opening had left them all waiting, howling, ready to burst through impatiently. Let's go! The captain gently exhaled, yet remained calm, his hand gripping a military saber, his eyes resolute. We have to face it eventually. It seems our death is already ordained. Rather than dying here, we might as well die with dignity. Everyone's heart sank, mouths agape but unable to retort. They were well aware this was a death trap. To have reached the control room alive was already a miracle, and now, their gazes fixed on the deluge of monsters flooding in, and the third layer's gates being battered, cracks forming, more terrifying monsters about to step through. In such a situation, no hope was in sight, let alone escaping this place, they would still be under the control of these corporations, researchers, and behind them the vast superpower association. They were just a sea-level team. How could they possibly stand against such immense darkness? The conclusion seemed inevitable. Duen clenched his teeth. No, don't give up. Countless people have already been engulfed by this darkness. Even if we are two, we must fight with all our might to leave clues for the outside world. Even if we can't escape, let us be the last team to die in this swamp. It's all worth it. That is the meaning of our existence. His last words were practically a shout. Why the hell are you yelling? Can that give you a buff? No, that's not right. Su Chi's eyes flickered. Looking at the others, it seemed like it really could. Everyone's eyes now seemed filled with determination. The slump from moments before was swept away. What was more, the divine power in Duen's body, following that roar, burst forth once again. And this time, this power bestowed strength upon everyone. Each person's body felt a significant surge in strength, and with a roar, they charged toward the attacking monsters. Is this the effect of a battle roar? Su Chi murmured to himself. But why don't I feel anything? He channeled spiritual energy into the spiritual eyes, slightly squinting his left eye, and saw colorful waves of energy rippling through the air like waves. Is this divinity? With the help of spiritual eyes, Su Chi could see its true form. It was like an emanation of faith. The connected individuals, they all seemed to share the same faith. Hence they were tied together and received blessings. Divinity seems to be related to the power of faith. Su Chi stretched out his hand and grasped the divinity, trying various methods to see if he could capture it in his item slot. But it was like sand slipping through his fingers, disappearing in an instant. Trying to absorb it into his body was equally futile. It just floated away as if completely untouchable. It seems that only those who believe in this God can receive his care, his sanctuary. Su Chi gently mused to himself. This then must be connected to the shrine. Before, the reputation system mentioned countless shrines and the importance of totems, but it could not be activated in the short term, it looks like. That's the key to accumulating the power of faith, which is related to divinity. In other words, the power of faith is also the key to becoming divine. Based on what I've seen, the people of this world must all be the followers, the worshippers of some god, which is why they can be blessed by the Divine Son's divinity buff. Su Chi now had a clearer outline and hypothesis about this world. It seems that there must be something of extreme value here to have drawn the attention of the Abyss Church. And moreover, according to the attitude of the Superpower Association, Duen is the most crucial element. Su Chi had almost hit the nail on the head with his analysis. Though he lazed around and played the actor, he was actually integrating all the information he came across. Of course, lazing around was also quite comfortable. He no longer attempted to touch the divinity. Before a burst occurs, it's important to take Duen, who has been targeted, away. The Divine Son is a very important card. The main quest, all the keys to this. Of course. Su Chi looked towards the surrounding monitors and lightly tapped with his finger. Buddy, stop watching. He cut off all the video feeds. And at that moment, high above, on a fleet of heavily armed vehicles, an elderly man and the Superpower 7 were also aboard, staring at the screens that had just been cut off, having just been closely watching everything transpiring in the research factory. Was that just now? A blonde man was somewhat astonished. Indeed. A woman said in a deep voice, that was divinity. That man called Su Buxian. Beside them, Hedgehog Head spoke coldly. He can even manipulate the waves of divinity with his hand. He stated emphatically, each word clear. He is undoubtedly the Divine Son. Any previous doubts had now all but solidified into a certainty about Su Chi's identity. The sudden burst of divinity, his manipulating actions, the increased strength of the people, all lined up with the divinity's command over the worshippers' powers. Now, a large number of Grade A personnel have been mobilized, all quietly heading towards that vicinity. Priest, should we also use our powers to get there quickly? It seems the X organization is also making some moves. No rush. We want them all to come. The elderly man calmly watched the reversing scenery outside the car window. Whether it be the Divine Son, X organization, or my dear old friend, they will all be buried today for their great God. And at that moment, not far from the industrial park, Bai Yilan and his group had just finished dealing with the departing Grade A team, and also simultaneously received an urgent order transmitted from the mind of the old man. Divine Son. The Divine Son has appeared. The man with the beard's face changed drastically. His eyes filled with shock and confusion. Bai Yilan and others had just ended the battle and were tidying up, and seeing the discomposed state of the three, their expressions were filled with bewilderment. Divine Son. What situation? At the same time, the old man's voice also appeared in their minds. Fellow outsiders, please heed my request. I ask you, save our Divine Son. Bai Yilan and the others listened to the old man's request and narration. Their expressions showed astonishment, amazement, and gravity. Indeed, the young man patted Bai Yilan's shoulder. I told you it wouldn't be that simple. After entering paradise, there was a certain low probability that various instances would be connected with the present world. But I really did not expect to encounter the Divine Son from the legends. Yeah, Divine Son, Bai Yilan said in a grave tone. Other players knew something about it, but the knowledge was limited. Someone recalled with confusion. I remember after the major update of Paradise, it was mentioned countless life from the past are recovering, and a great number of challenges are about to come. All sorts of forces, the progeny of the old, the heavenly pride of the 10,000 realms will all arrive. And this was just information known to the ordinary or lower-level players. People like Bai Yilan and the young man understood much more. With the recovery trend, we have not seen many of the heavenly pride, and now we've already encountered an existence like the Divine Son. The Divine Son, as the bloodline or inheritor of God, was truly an existence they looked up to. Its talent and identity represented unparalleled excellence and extraordinariness. But now, they were actually being asked to rescue the Divine Son. Although the people did not fully understand the situation, they did not delve into it, and their faces showed some excitement. This was an opportunity. As long as they saved the Divine Son, it meant they could establish a relationship with him, gain the Divine Son's favor, and even generate greater value. There was hardly any hesitation. They all chose to agree. Bai Yilan gave a slight nod, and the young man's tone grew much warmer. Professor, there's no way we wouldn't want to help with this. Bai Yilan gave the young man a look. This guy, his face had truly shown two different aspects upon learning the other was a Divine Son. However, he could understand. If it were any other instance, after leaving it, they would almost never return, and building a good relationship with the characters inside the instance was completely meaningless and unnecessary. But now, not only was the other side connected to the present world, as soon as the Divine Son appeared, it meant that this was the recovery of ancient forces or congregations. At any rate, they had to fulfill the other's request and establish a good relationship with this great Divine Son. Main quest added. 1. Defeat Superpower 7. Introduction. Superpower 7 possesses extraordinary strength and an unknowable terrible purpose. Please help Organization X defeat them. Upon completing the quest, all can obtain related spirit coins. 2. Rescue the Divine Son. Introduction. Accidentally uncovered clues related to the Divine Son. He is now in countless dangers. Can you help him escape? Protect the Divine Son for 72 hours to complete the task. Quest reward. Will receive spirit coins and gifts from the superpower race. 3. Hidden quest. Description. Feature. Unique. Once triggered by someone, it cannot be triggered by others. Reward. God's gift. Has the main quest changed? Bai Yilan's brows twitched slightly, and the other players were also stunned for a moment. They had seen the first one, the very thing they were entrusted by Organization X before. The Divine Son was a newly triggered content. But everyone's gaze inevitably moved to the last item. God's gift. Everyone's breath clearly paused as their emotions surged, completely unsettled. Though it's hidden, at this moment. But no matter what, we must trigger it. This was God's gift. Bearded Man and the others in the distance were making preparations, their expressions solemn as if they were facing a matter of life and death. Everyone, are you ready? The crowd nodded. Then let's set off right now. We must not delay a moment longer, and go to where the Divine Sun is. The operation to rescue the Divine Sun had begun. The Divine Sun, targeted by countless people, the majestic existence that the players wanted to cling to, Su Buxian. Unbeknownst to him at the moment, he had replaced Duan and became the target in others' eyes. Right now, they were frantically fighting their way out, and it must be said, divinity was a good thing, as they were able to forge a bloody path under the sanctuary of divinity. Of course, some monsters they could not deal with were all sent flying by Su Qi with a swing of his staff. Looking at it this way, this so-called divinity, and the sanctuary received in the anxious land before, seemed to be essentially the same thing. Su Qi felt carefully. But this divinity is clearly not as powerful as that of the distant present world master. Regardless of the quantity of divinity, just the strength within it, it was not on the same level at all. It was like comparing the quicksand that would fall between one's fingers to the solar flares flowing around the sun. And Su Qi was not in a hurry to clear them out, because right now, Duan was becoming more valiant as the battle continued. With a glint in his eyes and every pore on his body seemed to be breathing and pulsing with astonishing divinity, affecting the surroundings, unlocking his own strength continuously in combat. And also, he was constantly absorbing the surrounding chaotic energies, and with divinity he was able to suppress it, and Su Qi also saw the chaotic energies on the others being suppressed. In other words, divinity or power of faith can both suppress negative things. Su Qi was thinking. It seemed that power of faith had many functions. It looks like the shrine must be expedited. Su Qi murmured to himself. He had always been planning. According to the reputation system's explanation, to reach the level of belief, a following of 2,000 people is required to activate a totem. Crafting just one totem requires 5,000 spirit coins and specific materials. Can only be used by one person close at hand. It's like a jade pendant that has been blessed, or a sealed string of prayer beads. Absorbing the faith of one person, it can also protect one. Su Qi's totem had already been made long ago. That was Starfire. Su Qi, by emitting a fixed light frequency and combining binary encoding with the Super Dream Child protocol, developed the unique Starfire totem of the Hustlers. With it, Starfire could replace the function of the totem. Not only is it eternal, but also importantly, it's free. Totem, currently at level 1. Su Qi looked at his own reputation panel. Totem, the Hustlers Starfire. Current level 1. Current totem holders, 36 people. Insufficient number of people and level, unable to generate the power of faith. To the next upgrade, the number of totem holders needs to reach 100 people. Note: after reaching level 5, the totem can open the shrine. Su Qi obtained the Starfire at the very end of the ranking battle, and started creating the totem with it in Evil Town, which is the first instance after entering Paradise. The only holder of Starfire was the youth Yi Yuzi. Of course, he also left a great abundance of Starfire there. As for how much, it almost completely filled the entire underground space. Leaving so much for him, and now only 36 followers have developed, progress is slow. However, Su Qi was not in a hurry. The Hustlers sect was still growing, and naturally had many true followers. Now, he just needed to gradually promote Starfire, spread it to everyone, and formally let it become the totem of the Hustlers sect. Boom! A massive roar came from behind, sending ripples through the air. This roar also brought everyone back from the endless slaughter and prompted them to look back. How did we kill so many monsters? I just feel full of strength and hope, becoming so powerful. The captain was also silent. They had fought their way here as if heeding a charge, occupied by a powerful courage in everyone's hearts. The effect was terrifying. It indeed created a bloody path, And now, they had reached the first level. Only now did people come to their senses and saw the bodies lying behind them. Wait, what is that back there? Among the corpses lay a huge elite monster, swollen all over, every vein pulsating, exuding visible terrifying strength. And that roaring bellow came from it. I forgot to remind you. Su Qi also looked that way. When you kill fiercely, these surviving monsters will gradually absorb the surrounding black liquid like cultivating a goo. The more you kill, the more this black liquid accumulates in each surviving monster. Now, Su Qi looked at that massive monster, which had even slapped surrounding dense monsters to death. The surrounding black liquid moved like wriggling worms, quickly flowing into the monster's body. It's about to become the king among the monsters. Everyone's expression tightened, clenching their teeth, but with little fear in their hearts. Duan stood in front of everyone, his knife blood-stained, yet his eyes sparkled. I believe. We will definitely get out. We will definitely win. Understood. Su Qi looked at Duan, who had also emerged as a leader. And the unique aura on Duan was even more noticeable, less childish, more sharp, and his strength had also grown. Even without much intervention from Su Qi, he had managed to fight his way here. However, Su Qi looked back at the huge monster, its body pitch black. The previously mentioned black liquid now clung to its skin as if it were lacquer. Meanwhile, the creature was killing more and more surrounding monsters, with a massive amount of black liquid continuing to gather. People also noticed something wrong. The monster's roaring gradually subsided, and the vicious face slowly returned to calm. Its bloodthirsty eyes now seemed eerily profound. It was as if a new, emotionless, terrifying creature was emerging. Su Qi looked into the creature's eyes, his expression calm. The accumulated chaos had caused a qualitative change from quantity, gradually transforming from a wild beast into a thinking being, a metamorphosis that testified to the frightening nature of the chaos. And furthermore, Su Qi saw a totem gradually forming on the other's chest. Is this the symbol of the god of chaos? Indeed, each god that came from the abyss possessed their own formidable legions, much like the evil god's pollution monsters, the god of anxiety's ghost faces and various blood demons, and now it was the turn of the god of chaos's troops. This isn't going to be easy. Follow me, attack. Before the opponent could even make a move, Duan roared lowly, burst forth and charged. The others didn't hesitate either. They actually followed Duan and decisively attacked. Tisk was just about to applaud your leadership qualities, and now you're just going hard into the fight? Su Qi watched the scene indifferently. The monster's strength had reached the threshold of the 7th rank. These people had been fully buffed, qualifying for the 8th rank, and though Duan had divinity bestowed upon him, he could only reach the upper levels of the 8th rank, far from overcoming this hurdle. As expected, in a few exchanges, the monster instantly burst towards the sky, then raised its hand. Everyone's expressions changed instantly, their bodies struck by terrible, overpowering pressure. The next moment, boom! A roar seemed to come from the monster's palm. The air exploded. Everyone was instantly sent flying. Only Duan clenched his teeth tightly, a military knife positioned in front of him, blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. But he still stood his ground, directly confronting the monster. The monster's eyebrows remained calmly furrowed. Its emotionless fingers produced a sharp, chilly gleam as they stabbed towards Duan. Ah! Duan's roar echoed, strained and utterly explosive. He even managed to block it. Su Qi lowered his sunglasses slightly. Are all divine sons like the hot-blooded protagonists of some anime? Want to burst seed? Just do it. However, the next moment, Duan only lasted less than 10 seconds. Then there was a snap sound. He was slapped away in an instant. The power from the divinity in his bloodline ultimately had its limits. But as of this point, Duan's potential had been fully stimulated. Any further stimulation would likely have been lethal. The monster calmly turned its gaze towards Su Qi, who stood in the middle of the road. It didn't waste words. As long as there were still people standing, its attack wouldn't stop. The Super Dream Protocol recorded the entire process of Duen using divinity to suppress the chaos. The data is almost sufficient, and DX 515's improvement plan has made a breakthrough, though it still lacks something. Su Qi silently watched the holographic screen in front of him, which showed a plethora of characters rolling crazily. What's missing is... The monster, with a fierce intent to kill, already pounced toward Su Qi, its terrible chilly gleam about to pierce through his chest. Eft! Su Qi slammed his guide cane hard. It pierced directly through its hand and pressed against the ground. What's lacking is the naturally aggregated information of the chaotic creatures. At this moment, outside the factory, a class A team was jumping down from a helicopter, a drop of over 50 meters. Yet each person had a calm demeanor, slamming into the ground and kicking. Each of the 10 team members possessed awakened abilities and increased physical strength under the non-perfect potions of DX 515. Someone gently pressed their wristwatch. This is what a divine sun looks like. Displayed on it was Su Qi. At this very moment, the entire industrial park had already been sealed off, and those who were supposed to evacuate had all departed. This level A squad hadn't rushed in yet. They had taken their positions on high ground. Their eyes calmly surveyed the area below, revealing a trace of a cold smile. According to Headquarters' detection of divine fluctuations, the divine sun, having just awakened, possesses weak divinity within. His strength barely reaches level B at most. Weak, blood of a god. If it weren't for the orders from above, we could already be walking out with his head by now. As commanded by those elders, namely the Superpower 7, their only task was to seal off this realm and then set up some dangerous weapons, prepare the trap, and wait for the enemy to fall into it. As soon as the enemy would appear, reinforcements would naturally be prompted to reveal themselves. When that time came, it would mark a historic moment for a sweeping capture. They had taken their positions on high ground and smelled the strong stench of blood from within. The number of monsters in this factory is sufficient to produce a Dark Walker presence, which are life forms of level A danger. They might already have died at their hands. That would truly be a pity. I wanted to taste what it's like to kill a divine sun. They waited with faint smiles on their faces, yet with a sharp coldness in their eyes. Meanwhile, at the same time, members of Organization X were in the midst of urgent action, assembling in a very short time to formulate a rescue plan and strategy. And, despite the operation reaching the highest level of urgency, there was no chaos within their ranks, as the old professor's methods provided extraordinary strength in support of everyone. Not to mention, apart from the faculty of School X, a large number of ability users lurking in various locations were also on the move. The past, the lying in wait, has finally come to the time to fight. This concerns the future, the fate of us all. Kin of the same blood, children of a god under the same world. A common belief. How could we escape this boundless darkness? It all depends on today. Many high-ranking officials of Organization X, people of the past. Loyalty and faith carried them with a readiness to stake their lives, and they were rapidly gathering. But they had also clashed countless times with the Superpower Association. They were aware that it was enemy territory, filled with unimaginable dangers and ambushes, and even now, they were monitoring everything going on there, though their opponents had yet to make a move. However, it was clear that many Level A squads were hurrying over. This was the overt plot presented before them. Because of the Divine Sun's presence, the Superpower Association was in no hurry. The Divine Sun has just awakened, therefore his strength is negligible. His identity is what matters most. Just like Lu Chan, trapped among the enemy forces. The young man in the swiftly moving vehicle muttered to himself, "Now we are the prey that must be rescued." And they are ready for anything, fearless and confident. Thus, Bai Yilin murmured softly, "This is the difficulty of the main quest line to rescue the Divine Sun, a true nightmare-level challenge. Every step is fraught with lethal danger." Players had gone from excitement to a heavy seriousness now, as the rewards were generous. but they would only be earned upon successful completion of the main quest. And at present, they were entirely in the camp of Organization X, but regrettably, that camp was completely suppressed by the Superpower Association, with the Superpower 7 overshadowing everything, and apparently there was also an unsettling force present. Most of Organization X's people have already used Zero's teleportation ability to assemble elsewhere and have been transported to the safe zone outside that factory. However, their whereabouts are unknown to the opposition. What should we do? For the time being, we'll hold off. The professor can already sense the presence of the Divine Sun, who is currently still alive and well with no immediate danger. Moreover, someone gazed silently at the distant sky dome. It seems that members of the Superpower Association are also hidden somewhere. A deadly atmosphere was spreading, with all undercurrents surging violently as if obstructed by only a thin veneer. Any slight disturbance could cause it to burst forth like the opening of a dam in an instant. And the Superpower 7 stood with the white-haired elder amidst a field of ripples. They had already arrived here, gazing around with indifferent eyes, also waiting for the other party's move. My lord! They don't seem to have arrived yet? The white-haired elder sat in his wheelchair, his drooping eyelids shading his profound gaze which held a murky light. I know my old friend well. Even at this point, he would quickly regain his composure and make all necessary preparations. So, are they already nearby? The blond man squinted, sensing carefully. But I can't feel them. If you could sense them, we would have already wiped them out by now. The elder's hoarse voice conveyed an indifferent tone. That person's spirit shield is so strong that even if they were right before your eyes, you probably wouldn't see them. The blond man dared not contradict, and a woman beside him asked, So what do we do? Hasn't that level of squad already been waiting for a long time? If the other side chooses to remain hidden, then let's use the crisis of the Divine Sun to force them out. The white-haired elder looked down at everything below, uttering just one word, perhaps. At this very moment, the people within the factory remained unaware of it all. Only Su Chi heard, a cryptic, secretive voice rising in his own mind. Be careful. They have started to act. The voice from the other side transmitted old and seemingly unstable, with significant interference and restriction. Grandpa? Who are you? Su Chi was skilled in responding, but the other side didn't answer, as if they could only contact him one way. Now, we have reached the forefront team, but we only have part of the strength. The old foundation is still recovering. Only by offering it can we have a chance of winning. Su Chi paused for a moment, looked towards the others. Their expressions hadn't changed. It seemed the voice wanted to contact him alone and carried an urgent, heavy plea. So, the voice paused, gravely. Respected Divine Sun, please believe, no matter what, you must survive. We will do everything to rescue you. Then the voice was cut off. Su Chi mumbled to himself. I thought I was about to awaken Grandpa's golden finger. As a result, someone was coming to rescue the Divine Sun. Indeed, one thing after another is bursting out uncontrollably. Su Chi was not surprised. He roughly knew what was going to happen from what he overheard from the Super Dream Protocol. His main mission, from the start, was to discover the truth of this world. Being part of a nightmare-level team instance, Su Chi didn't think it was going to be easy, and from the information he understood, there were many things that needed to be pushed forward. The most critical was still the Divine Sun. Hence Su Chi hadn't been doing much else, leaving everything else to his teammates to advance. However, Su Chi, those words just now, clearly meant for the Divine Sun, but they came to me. Did they get the wrong number, or? At this moment, the A-rank squad had already received their instructions, and with a thunderous crash, they landed on the ground, and they started running rapidly. Divine Sun, a calm intent to kill appeared on their faces. We can finally make a move. Who kills the Divine Sun first? There's a hefty reward. Intense footsteps sounded with booming explosions. Their speed was extremely fast, and they did not hide their movements. This was the command from above to stir up noise, to make X organization notice. They entered a factory. It still required passing through a long decontamination corridor. However, the smell of the disinfectant liquid was suppressed, and they smelled a thick scent of blood, indicating how many monsters had died simultaneously. Ahead, a dull, low roar came along. "This is the sound of a dark walker," someone whispered softly. "If the Divine Sun is killed, controlling this dark walker won't be easy either, but no matter." They directly used their ability to twist the doors of the decontamination chamber into shards, which flew outward, and just as their strength was ready to make a move, the scene in front of them caused everyone's pupils to shrink slightly. Monster corpses covered the floor, blood and flesh strewn about, and the phrase "a river of blood" fully described the scene. But these were not the most important for them. The Dark Walker's entire massive body was pierced by 5 black arrows and pinned against a metal door. It was lowly howling and roaring, constantly struggling, but it was utterly unable to break free from those seemingly light arrows. Everyone's expressions slightly darkened. Although they did not know what had happened, they had already seen a group of people resting nearby, and the person standing there was the Divine Sun they were to kill. Kill! No hesitation. They all unleashed their abilities at once. Some also pulled the triggers of their firearms. Bullets and powers rapidly aimed solely at Su Qi. "Brother Su, be careful," Duan shouted. "Don't rush." Su Qi was inserting various devices into the body of the Dark Walker, and he had just threaded the last line through, activating the Super Dream Protocol. Installation of 12 data analyzers completed. Super Dream Protocol will suspend other operations, using 100% computing power for data analysis and research. Current progress 0.01%. Done. Su Qi turned around, looking towards the people charging at him. The floor around him deformed inch by inch, the air upheaving, shooting out cold light flashes. A vast wave of killing intent arrived. Duan and others widened their eyes. 10 seconds later, Su Qi slowly exhaled a puff of smoke from his gun in hand. All the A-level ability users attacking him had their heads blown off by bullets, collapsing into puddles of blood. Good. That settled too. The captain remained silent. He found himself at a loss for words ever since he witnessed Su Qi pressing his hand on the Dark Walker, a creature that seemed to perplex him. And now, this team, the A-level squad members who were absolutely superior figures to him, were all shot in the head by this young man. 1 bullet each. Why? Aren't they ability users? Why didn't they dodge? Only one person shuddered as if waking up from some state, managing to avoid it. His pupils contracted as he looked at the bodies fallen around him. You have spiritual abilities. That instant, he felt like he was plummeting into the abyss. His body went rigid, and he was incapable of doing anything. Fortunately, his own abilities were related to spiritual power, allowing him a brief moment to react. But the next moment, a chill ran down his spine as a deadly whooshing sound approached from behind. In that instant, he made a slight dodging movement, but whoosh! The bullet he had just dodged came back at a bizarre angle. It struck his shoulder, leaving a trail of blood. What on earth is happening? He was terrified, shocked, trembling as he watched Su Qi walking towards him. Divine Sun! He growled hoarsely, "Die!" At that moment, he burst out with all his strength, sending a mass of metal sheets flying from all directions towards Su Qi approaching him. Su Qi stepped forward. Though he wasn't moving quickly, he evaded every piece of sharp, cold gleaming metal. He fell to the ground, clutching his shoulder, still struggling to use his ability to keep Su Qi away. But it was to no avail. His eyes wide with fear and confusion, he saw the other man crouch down before him. Yet he didn't beg for mercy, instead clenching his teeth hard. "Just recovered. And you have such formidable power. But you're still going to die here. No one can save you." At that moment, he activated his ability, and a metal shard pierced right through his own skull. Choosing suicide, Su Qi silently watched the man's body. "I just wanted to remind you," Sleeping on the ground isn't good for your health. But it seems I've mistakenly been taken for the divine son, meaning now everyone's watching me. Su Chi paused. Though it appears to be a huge misunderstanding, but Su Chi had a rather bold idea, revealing an innocuous smile. I'll take this misunderstanding. He walked back to the side of the dark walker. Everyone's expressions shifted to astonishment, wanting to ask something but not knowing how to begin. However, Duan muttered curiously, Brother Su, you are so strong. But why are all these people attacking you? And what did they mean by calling you Divine Son? It feels like those two words are somewhat significant. Duan was obviously still recovering and hazy, both in strength and self-awareness. It's a long story, but it seems I can't avoid talking about it now. My huge, terrifying, utterly deep secret. Su Chi gently placed his hand on his shoulder, and using the title and ability of the sect hierarch of the Hustlers, he recorded his aura, a divine aura, and looked at others. He raised his sunglasses. I'm not blind. Everyone paused. The young man with long hair widened his eyes, roaring, We knew that already, okay. You've been moving in and out among the monsters. Who would still think you're blind? Su Chi paused. Also sorry, everyone, for hiding it from you for so long. And sorry for what? You've already said it. How can you hide something like this? Others also couldn't help but want to say their piece in ridicule. Su Chi paused. In any case, besides this big secret, there's another thing that's not as important. That's my identity. Su Chi looked outside. It's the descendant of the god of this world. Everyone stared, pupils contracting sharply. Of this world. Can you stop panting so hard? Bastard. Bai Yilin and a group of players silently looked into the distance, the young man idly twirling a knife in his hand. Why aren't we moving yet? The divine son is still unharmed. Although the professor's arrangements are ready, if we attack rashly before the enemy acts fully, it could lead to irreversible consequences. The bearded man said gravely. Aren't you worried that the divine son might be killed outright? That won't happen. Beside them, the ripples slightly fluctuated, and a silver-haired woman emerged, pushing an elderly man in a wheelchair into their view. Professor, the divine son is no mere mortal, the old professor gently began. Should there indeed be an extreme crisis, he would be passively protected by his divinity, but, of course, the protection won't last very long. So, the elder's eyes held depth, wisdom, and seriousness. I must prepare everything to face all the ensuing crises. Being anxious wouldn't solve any problems. Dealing with the Superpower Association was already a disadvantage, not to mention that the enemy had a traitor who deeply understood them. To grasp this lifeline, one must be prepared for anything. After all, this was the most crucial day that would decide the fate of the entire world. Countless people were quietly gathering. The forces hidden in the shadows were slowly converging. Something seems off, the blond man said, looking through the ripples down at the factory. This is already the third group of Class A teams that has gone in. Not only have they failed to flush out X organization's people, but those who enter also end up lifeless. Ah Fong, use your ability to probe and see what's actually happening inside. Called Hedgehog Head, Ah Fong immediately activated his power. His pupils slightly whitened, but he soon faced strong resistance. The whiteness in his pupils disappeared instantly, and he said, somewhat astonished, My ability can't sense it. A power inside is blocking all probing. It must be divinity. Divinity was enough to suppress their abilities. No. The elder simply uttered one word. Sir. The woman looked towards the white-haired elder. It's just that you don't know how to use your ability, the elder said lightly. The white-haired elder gently reached out his hand toward Hedgehog Head. Under everyone's horrified gazes, Hedgehog Head trembled, his complexion turning as pale as if all life had been drained from him. Sir, don't speak. The elder's calm voice came softly. I'll teach you how to use it. The next moment, The white-haired elder's eyes slightly whitened. The group flinched at the sight. This was one of the priest's abilities, absorbing someone else's ability. It was extremely domineering and powerful. Of course, due to physical weakness and lack of spiritual energy, the priest couldn't store too much power in his body, but even so, it was terrifyingly formidable. One must understand that in this world, everyone revered abilities, their significant source of power. And now, the priest could easily take all of that away. At this very moment, under the ancient servant's powerful aura, Hedgehog Head's ability, Far Pupil, was pushed to its limits. It could instantly probe all information within thousands of meters and use the spiritual energy there to lock onto targets. Once locked on, anything he threw could hit the target without losing any speed during flight. Of course, this ability had its limits, only functioning within a kilometer radius. Meanwhile, the elder's gaze was falling on the inside of the factory. He effortlessly broke through all the divinity obstructing his view and saw the scene inside, corpses everywhere, including their dispatched Class A team. Each person had died from a headshot. Bullets, firearms were a joke in front of Class A ability users, but now everyone had been killed in such a manner. Moreover, the white-haired elder calmly looked at the back of the Divine Son who was facing the Dark Walker. Suddenly, the Divine Son turned around. It seemed like his sunglasses made eye contact with him for a moment. In that moment, murderous intent filled the white-haired elder, and he chose to act immediately. A terrifying power transformed into a laser-like beam of light. It locked onto Su Chi from afar and shot towards him. Boom! The entire factory wall was pierced by a half-meter-wide beam of light. The white-haired elder opened his eyes, coughing and gasping, subconsciously glancing at his hand where the ring flickered with terrifying spiritual energy. The group's bewildered gazes all focused on him. Sir! They didn't understand why the elder had just acted. It's nothing. The white-haired elder's hoarse voice slowly crawled out from his throat. His complexion pale, but with a chilling malice. He himself was somewhat unclear why he had suddenly acted. Was it because the Divine Son had glanced his way, perhaps noticed him, or was it the immense internal dread brought by betraying the god? He had acted almost without thinking. As a priest, he had experienced countless battles, and even now he struggled to pinpoint the reason. Sir, X organization has started to make a move. At this very moment, someone received news. It seems because of the power you just used, priest, they can no longer hold back. But isn't it a bit late? The Divine Son, I fear.
No.
The white-haired elder's murky eyes flickered with cold light. The divinity within him will protect him, but only for so much time. Not instant killing, but not so hard to kill either. And now, the main thing was that they had already sensed the disturbance and were forced to show themselves. Numerous X-organization forces. Here they come. Space was rippling massively, almost without any disguise. A large number of figures jumped out from the teleportation gates in all directions. A terrifying explosion first went off directly in the industrial park. Dangerous powers instantly blasted toward the surrounding ripples. A woman from the Superpower 7 sketched a faint smile. It seems they also know that there are ambushes everywhere. This is the decisive battle they are going all out for. However, it is ultimately just a fearless struggle. The elder spoke softly, stretching out his hand toward Hedgehog Head, who was pale and weak, but the next moment felt a familiar power returning to him. Hedgehog Head trembled. Thank you, sir. Go. Kill them all thoroughly. The white-haired elder's murky eyes were like hollows, yet they possessed a terrifying chill that made one shudder. He issued the command. The next moment, the Superpower 7 took immediate action. Terrifying energy burst forth instantly. At this very moment, inside the factory, everyone looked up in astonishment. In the enclosed space, there were buildings made of thick metal steel plates, yet they were pierced directly by a terrifying light. With such speed and power, they couldn't react at all. And Su Chi, who was targeted, patted the dust off himself and stepped out from the huge hole that had been pierced. That was close. Almost got killed. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Duen also wiped the sweat from his forehead. The last strike was very terrifying, and although he didn't understand why the target was Su Qi, he felt a fatal danger. He said, "That was indeed close. I'm glad you dodged it, Brother Su. Otherwise, that strike would have—" "No, I mean my experimental subjects were almost killed." Su Qi carried the Dark Walker out from the hole. The Super Dream Protocol was still intact, as various detection instruments were conducting a comprehensive analysis on it. People. Duen clenched his fists tightly. "Anyway, Brother Su, stand behind me. I feel that your identity is very important. They want to kill you, we must not let them succeed. I will use all my strength to protect you." People smiled bitterly. How could they protect him? The last strike was clearly terrifying, already beyond their ability. But looking at Duen's resolute stance and words, everyone's heart involuntarily surged with strong courage. Even their own strength felt slightly increased. Quite a strength buff. The power in the words could actually directly stimulate everyone's potential, but he also understood that it was the power of faith at work, and from the current situation, the provoked potential did not have major side effects, only that the mastery of power was unfamiliar. No wonder so many people choose to believe in gods. Belief indeed provided power, albeit in a gentle way. However, compared to the power of the abyss, it's completely inadequate. The power of the abyss was even more sinister and brutal. Anyone who became a cultist could gain this dangerous and terrifying strength, and with a massive and immensely strong background, numerous bizarre beings were among them. No wonder the Abyss Church has also spread across the 10,000 realms. Who wouldn't be tempted by it? I've even signed up for the Venerable Plan. Su Qi looked at the progress of the Super Dream Protocol. 45.6%. The current computing power was already terrifying, but it still required some time, showing that this DX 515 was merely a low-quality product. Boom! 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 There were huge sounds exploding outside the factory. Initially, they couldn't hear the noises outside, but after the light beam blasted a large hole, they could also catch the sounds coming from the outside world. Their faces changed. What is this? Various sounds of explosions and battles were endless outside. The colliding powers are determining the direction of this world, said Su Qi softly. He now had a rough outline of the world secrets mentioned in the main storyline. Everything will change with this all-out decisive battle. At this moment, a black shadow flashed past, and an ability user actually teleported directly through the wall, appearing within everyone's line of sight. The captain looked at this black shadow in surprise, instantly recognizing him. Dark King! Is that a name? Su Qi muttered. It's the first time I'm hearing someone's parents naming them something king. Isn't that embarrassing? Brother, stop joking. Duen couldn't help but tremble. Don't you know who he is? He's an S-class ability user, only second to the Superpower 7, and he's also one of the famous star ability users. The opponent emitted an aura like a shadow, instantly targeting Su Qi without any hesitation. His eyes filled only with the intent to kill. Sorry, Divine Son. I need to take your head. Su Qi. It's still aimed at me. Duen growled. I'll block it. Su Qi. So, the true Divine Son is blocking the fatal attack for the fake Divine Son, right? Forget it. Just keep this thing safe for me. Just make sure it doesn't die. Su Qi directly threw the Dark Walker to the crowd. Also, it seems I don't need to make a move. At that moment, a flash of lightning. A figure sprinted through the space with extreme speed. In the blink of an eye, it appeared around them. His body seemed to be emitting sparks due to the friction from his speed. Divine Son, I won't let him lay a hand on you. He instantly lunged towards that black shadow. Almost in the blink of an eye, the two flew out of the factory. The crowd watched the scene in amazement. The captain murmured, That's Organization X. Wanted by the Superpower Association, the hunted Organization X. Duan also stammered. Why do I feel my heartbeat quickening, and an inexplicable surge? Feels familiar. I have the urge to call out to them. Su Qi patted his shoulder. Impulse is the devil. Duan couldn't quite grasp his feelings, and stopped worrying about it. Anyway, the captain also came over and looked seriously at Su Qi. The situation is now clear. The Superpower Association is the leader of darkness, and the Organization X we have been wanting to hunt is actually the real protector. We must do our best to protect you. They looked towards Su Qi. For some reason, under the influence of a certain power, everyone felt a sense of duty rise within them. Of course, Su Qi naturally understood the reason, having originally been a god's follower, and under Duan's influence of divinity, the faith inside the crowd only became firmer, naturally leading them to protect the divine sun decisively. Duan nodded vigorously. Brother Su, don't worry, I'll do my best. A thunderous noise erupted again. At this very moment, the whole factory began to shake. The ground was trembling. Earthquake? The long-haired young man said gravely. No, it's probably an ability. Another S-class is making a move. At the same time, various structural beams and columns in the factory were melting. The ceiling gradually started cracking. Someone is destroying this place. It's going to collapse. Should we get out or maybe go straight underground to hide? That seemed to be the safest option at the moment, since too many terrifying ability users were clashing, and the Divine Sun was the key target. Let's go. Su Qi had already started walking. Instead of sitting idle, it's better to take the initiative. After all, they are no match for the Superpower Association. The opposition was completely prepared. The battle, although still raging intensely, was actually the probed entity harbored terrifying power, brewing silently. The crowd quickly followed Su Qi's pace towards the factory exit. Many also saw Su Qi's figure, their expressions tightening. Both murderous intent and shock appeared in their glances. Immediately, many people gave up fighting and started charging towards Su Qi. Furthermore, Su Qi slowly gripped his dark star. Who said that a divine sun has to hide in the back being protected? Lu Chan holding a sword and standing on Zhao Zilong's shoulders. Hacking his way in and out 7 times, isn't that normal? Divine Sun actually showed up. Kill him. From out of nowhere came a barrage of abilities. Cold flashes. They struck almost instantly. Most of the people were of a grade, and their abilities were often related to natural elements. Their target was also very clear, the suddenly appearing Su Qi. The air, boom boom boom, burst into successive explosions. From all directions they attacked Su Qi. The people of Organization X changed their expressions. They extended their hands. A mass of plants and animals, soil, and even air, all formed a defense in front of Su Qi. Protect the Divine Sun. The thunderous power collided instantly. The entire factory gate kept crumbling, creating cracks. Flakes fell off and collapsed. At the same time, several figures dashed towards Su Qi at extreme speed. Their power enhanced their bodies. Some with fingers turned into long knives, others with shoulders as hard as rocks. Their overwhelming strength and sharp weapons burst forth. This was the ability to alter their own bodies. No excess words. Their eyes filled with eagerness looked at Su Qi. Murderous intent filled the air. Giving no time to react, they pounced to kill. Divine Sun. The faces of Organization X's people changed drastically. They wanted to rescue him, but suddenly, they felt a wave of weakness spread over them. As if in that instant, their powers had malfunctioned, leaving them unable to unleash their strength. The deadly threats arrived from every angle in an instant. Yelling, what's the use of yelling? Won't I still be the one dealing with it all in the end? Su Qi calmly extended his hand, turning the guide cane into a military saber. This thing was actually pretty handy and had fused with part of the skills of the youth with black hair. Su Qi had already drawn his saber and stepped on the ground, leaping and moving instantaneously, like a bird soaring through electric wires. Whoosh! Lightning flickered and thunder roared within the blade. This was, after the Dark Star had devoured so many weapons, it had stimulated a new power, which was the ability to mix the attributes of two weapons together. A Thundering Hammer's attack could potentially trigger the Thunder attribute, merged into this military saber. And as if enchanted, Su Chi's speed had increased even further. In the midst of all the lethal pouncing, a cold flash suddenly burst forth. No terrifying power was displayed at this lightning strike moment. The person at the forefront grabbed his throat and knelt on the ground. The ability user with shoulders like rocks watched incredulously as an arm hung from the tree. Another ability user, whose fingers were sharp blades, had his fingers sliced off, and 3 cold blades were forcibly stabbed into his chest. The previously fatal threats crumbled at this moment, and the ability users themselves were directly overwhelmed. But Su Chi had already stopped midway. He gripped the military saber, glanced at it, and muttered to himself, "It seems to feel not bad." From beginning to end, he hadn't used any powers, not even spiritual energy. This was because after the previous battle with the youth with black hair, he had shown Su Chi a new path, using a few bullets with precise calculation to kill a powerful person with minimal strength. Of course, this couldn't easily be achieved through physical fitness and refining battle alone. Through direct battle and calculation, one could reach a high degree, but never as outrageous as the other party, who played with several people at will. Within this lay a power that greatly assisted, the all-heart communication, used by the youth with black hair, a terrifying power from the spiritual power sequence that could achieve a state of heart-to-heart unity. It not only allowed capturing all information in the ever-changing battles, but also, it seemed the youth with black hair could even see a brief future. And spiritual power, as Su Chi's strongest cheating attribute, had never been combined with actual close combat before, or it might be said that the threshold for this path was extremely high. Even he had not yet entered the door, not to mention reaching the terrifying realm of all-heart communication. However, Su Chi was after all Su Chi. He could spend a great deal of thought and effort to practice how to skillfully toss a water bottle in the air and balance it up, let alone something like all-heart communication, a spiritual realm. From the time the A-grade team charged in to the instantaneous battle just now, Su Chi hadn't used spiritual energy, relying solely on his spiritual power dispersing out, capturing each person's fatal point, then annihilating them one by one. Up to now, Su Chi already had a sense of clarity in his mind, as if it had become much more transparent. This was a trend in mastering spiritual power to enhance control and use of spiritual power, and likewise, it had another important role that was to completely control the power overflowing from his spiritual eyes. From entering this world, ever since the projection of the double pupils was discovered, it had never been calm. Su Chi could feel the spiritual eyes, that is, his left eye would uncontrollably twitch every so often, timing uncertain, but roughly every several hours. And at the moment of the twitch, his entire pupil would turn black, and the evil god's projection would appear behind him, as if possessing him, yet it was fleeting. And this was noticed because a probing force had just burst into the factory. Su Chi had just turned around, and the spiritual eyes suddenly twitched. The evil god's phantom appeared behind him, very faint, nearly transparent, and even the people standing beside him didn't notice at all. And the enemy seemed to sense a strong danger, sending yet another terrifying beam of energy attack. It was at that time, Su Chi sensed the sense of danger regarding this strength. Although they usually got along well, the degree of peril and fatality presented by evil god reached an infinite extent. To him, an ordinary person and a high-sequence elite were indistinguishable. Both could be killed with a mere slap. According to the information Su Chi had gathered about evil god since entering paradise, a mystical layer had come to shroud evil god's identity even more. The god of anxiety, god of chaos, or other abyss gods seemed to be under his dominion, and there was little information about this aspect. It involved ancient times, and some secrets were still buried in the land of old days. Either they were kept as absolute secrets or the people in paradise were unaware of them. In any case, as of now, Evil God had several titles that alone were enough to terrify countless individuals. The source of pollution, the Abyss Giant, and the leader of Abyss Church with numberless followers. Of course, the most frightening title was Friend of the Sect Hierarch of the Hustlers Sect. They were all buddies. Nevertheless, the level of difficulty and danger of this strength has exceeded expectations. We must quickly find a way to control it. Su Qi adjusted his sunglasses. The fluctuations from his spiritual eyes could even expose himself directly. Although the projection still seemed faint and transparent for now, it would undoubtedly undergo changes over time, perhaps even leading to incidents like the outbreaks caused by the curse of the god of anxiety. That would be troublesome then. Of course, it was now about settling the matters here, seizing as many resources, connections, and strength as possible to bolster the Hustlers sect. He would bring everyone possible aboard the same ship. After Su Qi had dealt with a few people, the other members of Organization X present quickly reacted and pounced toward the remaining ability users, resolving the situation. They rapidly gathered around Su Qi. Divine Son, we're here to protect you. Su Qi looked over, whose face was so thick, claiming to protect me after I've already killed everyone. He paused and said, I mean, why are there only a few of you around here now? Whether from Organization X or the Superpower Association, those present here were mainly of A and B grade strength, while the real powerhouses had yet to appear in this area. They're engaging in another area to prevent collateral damage here and are trying to diversify and hold their forces back, enabling only a few scattered individuals like us to break through here. The entire industrial park was vast. It took Su Qi's group nearly half an hour by car to reach the destination. But at this moment, they could see smoke rising in the distance, plenty of ruins, and large flames scattered all about, with thick smoke and distant rumbling sounds could be heard. This is a war, the captain murmured in astonishment at the scene before him. The Superpower Association, though not fully accounted for, had cultivated over 70 B-grade teams, around 20 A-grade squads, and 5 S-grade teams. Its might had likely fully deployed. And Organization X can actually confront and even hold them off? No! The youths of Organization X, releasing small green lights from their hands to heal recently injured companions, heavily responded while treating them. It's not like that. Our numbers are less than a third of theirs. We're holding them off purely with some inherited special objects. Their ability enhances each individual's strength or suppresses the opponent's, but the cost of using them is high, and it's doubtful we can hold on much longer, plus a few outsiders have restrained many S-levels, and some of them can even confront the Superpower 7. Due to his status as Divine Son, the other party was extremely forthcoming with information. And Su Qi's eyes slightly flickered. Good news. Just as he had thought, Organization X was indeed the defending side and was backed by divine reserves that directly related to their capacity to overcome the Superpower Association. Another piece of good news, the rest of his team had finally appeared. This group seemed to have taken another route, yet they stood with Organization X's camp, which suggested his guess was likely correct. Divine Son, we must escape from here immediately, someone solemnly said. There are more people coming from the front area now. Now that the powerful high-level combat forces can't hold on for long, the surrounding regions are filled with danger. While the mighty S-grade aren't free yet, we must break out. Su Qi paused and didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked towards Duan. What do you think? As a Divine Son, should I abandon my comrades and exchange their lives for a slim chance of my own survival? Duan trembled, not expecting Su Qi to direct the question at him. Duan hesitantly began, eventually lowering his head. I'm not a Divine Son. I don't know.
No.
Su Qi directly interrupted him. Now you are the Divine Son. Think of yourself as a true Divine Son. Immerse yourself in this role. Switch to his perspective. Stand at this life and death turning point, and answer me with your most genuine thoughts. What should you do? If I were the Divine Son. Duan murmured at this moment. He actually conveyed an indescribable temperament and emotions. Then he clenched his fists tightly. Of course, I would fight alongside them until the last moment. Every child of God should be protected. Good, that's spirited. Su Chi praised. There's nothing to worry about now. Gentlemen, weapons in hand, follow me. He smiled and said, kill the rebels. Burst their damn heads. The people from Organization X present were dumbstruck and couldn't help but follow Su Chi's lead. Unsure whether it was Duan's emotional influence or Su Chi's words that inspired them to fight to the death. In any case, they simply followed Su Chi, striding forward with determination. You know, the Superpower Association already had a numerical advantage. Although Organization X had special objects to suppress them, they were still at a great disadvantage. Everyone was stalling, waiting for a breach from the high-level combat power, waiting for a chance to break out. As long as the Divine Sun led the way, their mission would be complete. Divine Sun. He has appeared. Kill. A team was quickly approaching, seemingly because the Divine Sun had left the factory. Ability users from the Superpower Association from all directions were converging for the siege. On the way, other members of Organization X wanted to intercept, but were too strained to exert any strength effectively. Protect the Divine Sun. Break out of the encirclement. The squad guarding Su Chi roared and charged forward. Then, in less than half a minute, these people looked at the bodies scattered all around, somewhat perplexed. Do we really need to protect the Divine Sun? Follow me and move forward. Su Chi gestured grandly. Also, Duan. Subject, no, I'm here. It's fine. Say a few inspiring words. The team needs your motivation. Although Duan didn't understand why Su Chi asked him to do this, he complied. Understood. He bellowed. All comrades, believe in us, and believe in the Divine Sun. We will win this war. Now follow Brother Su, let's kill. Good. The morale of everyone clearly surged tremendously. See, just a few words from the true Divine Sun can provide such a buff. At this moment, in the distance on a high overpass above, from a tunnel that passes through a great mountain, a fierce battle with astonishing power was erupting. The Superpower 7, with S-Class terrifying strength, were unleashing their phenomenal power. In the sky dome above, two terrifying presences were clashing. Ancient and powerful forces were creating ripples. This was the confrontation between two true priests. How is the Divine Sun now? Meanwhile, below, the bearded man was still entangled in a fight with an S-Class, partially distracted and worried as he inquired about the situation from afar. They were trying to split the advanced combat power to create opportunities for the people below. Divine Sun. Someone hesitated to respond. What's wrong? The bearded man's expression turned anxious. Don't tell me. The Divine Sun has faced a fatal crisis?
No.
The person hesitated for a moment. The Divine Sun is leading a charge this way. The bearded man was taken aback. Wait, you said they're coming to kill us. He widened his eyes, but his initial reaction wasn't surprise. Instead, his heart suddenly sank. Damn it. Their primary goal was to keep the Divine Sun away from danger. That's why they desperately separated the enemy's top combat power. But after the Divine Sun awakened, though he could handle ordinary ability users without a problem, him coming their way wasn't what they wanted. He grew anxious. He was about to immediately send a message to the professor. At that moment, a column of blood trailed by various veins suddenly entangled and attacked the bearded man. Do you still have time to be distracted? One of the Superpower 7, wrapped in a red blood garment, with the ability to control blood, capable of producing all sorts of bizarre transformations, and of course, possessing terrifying and sharp lethal power. Boom! A giant blood blade flew narrowly past the bearded man's face. It struck the nearby overpass in an instant. The entire overpass was smoothly sliced. Such was the power of the Superpower 7. Gamers and others were entangled with an S-rank opponent. Only Bai Yilin and the young man could restrain the blonde man and the woman covered in black stripes. Boom! The young man gritted his teeth fiercely. A long knife shot across the sky, launching an ability at the blond man swiftly flying through the sky dome. Damn it! Is flying up around actually fun? I too can fly. He stomped hard on the spot, propelling himself upward. Spiritual energy burst out around him. Upon reaching 7th rank, spiritual energy could leave the body, and even without using abilities, skills, equipment, and so on, spiritual energy on its own had a certain power. Therefore, spiritual energy was developed for new uses, like the young man lifting his body with his own spiritual energy, achieving the purpose of flight. However, it required strong control and consumed a lot. The young man wouldn't have resorted to this if not pressed by the Birdman. Boom! The blond man's eyes turned red. A powerful energy sprayed out from his eyes. A terrifying laser burst in mid-air. The young man cursed, as controlling spiritual energy flight was difficult, even if he considered himself a genius, second only to terrifying individuals like Bai Yilin. Then bring it on. He too had his own sequence ability burst forth. For some reason, in this world, skills and equipment effects obtained from paradise seemed suppressed, but their own sequence abilities appeared unrestricted. The dreadful battle continued to rage. At this moment, a few S-ranks were preparing to continue their fight, but suddenly received a new order from a woman's voice within the Superpower 7. His mouth curled into a cold smile. I understand, my lord. These S-ranks suddenly shifted position, turning towards another direction. The yellow-haired gamer was deep in battle. His eyes widened. Where are you running? The bearded man roared lowly. They're going after the divine sun. Stop them. Ripples spread throughout the surrounding space. They, of course, possessed certain special objects, forming an energy circle in this area, requiring time and sacrifice to break through. This was also the significant item that kept the enemy's top combat forces trapped here. But the Divine Sun's breakthrough and approach instead prompted the enemy to change their deployment. Let's go! Members of Organization X mobilized swiftly with grave expressions. And at this moment, there was a bizarre ring in the sky dome, spinning in mid-air, surrounded by a massive particle storm. Damn it! The bearded man gritted his teeth and growled lowly. It's a special object. Special objects weren't just what they possessed. The white-haired priest also owned many, all from God's reserves. The power they could utilize. Initially intended for use during recovery, to fend off invasions and gain time for their glory to be restored, it was unforeseen they'd now be used in fratricidal conflict. And what was most despicable was, behind the enemy was a presence from the Abyss Church, God's reserves targeted. And though they couldn't open it upon the Divine Sun's death, with the Abyss Church's power, those reserves would likely be plundered clean. What to do? Bai Yilin struck down an opponent covered in weapons with a thunderous swing of his blade, his mind racing. The Divine Sun can't die. Should the Divine Sun perish, their main mission would fail and everything connected to Organization X would likely collapse. After the instance failure, one could use points from pollution value processing to force disengage and survive. Swish! Bai Yilin couldn't afford to ponder. His opponent was also one of the Superpower 7's top forces, with an extremely tricky ability. The long-haired man before him wore a trench coat, and behind him was an expanse of various spikes. Contained within were numerous sharp blades, mixed with swords and axes, bizarrely assorted. The ability to control weapons, The opponent's eyes went cold, and he summoned with both hands torrents of flying blades. Like a heavy downpour, the air boomed at that moment. Only someone with Bai Yilin's reflexes could weave through them. This couldn't go on. They were all constrained, lacking the excess strength to break the situation. Boom! At this moment, amidst the force's impact in the sky dome, the old professor's presence surged again. With a groan, he seemed to have paid a price. Ripples were surging wildly, surrounding mountain ranges. Incredibly, saw blossoms being birthed and blooming, each exuding an astonishing aura. Majestic strength burst forth. It charged toward the disk in the midst of the sky dome. Old man, using your strength so early? Another figure slowly emerged amidst the ripples, the white-haired priest with his hair flowing. He looked on serenely at the scene, his smile somewhat cold. Hearing that the divine son is in peril, you couldn't help but panic, could you? And the old professor also suddenly coughed, veins bursting across his body. He too emerged from the sky dome, gasping for breath incessantly. However, unlike before, at this moment, neither of them were confined to wheelchairs. Instead, their bodies had gained some muscle, as if they had shed their impending demise, like dead wood in spring. They were filled with a raging strength. Both knew, however, this was their resurrection technique. After all, as subordinates to the divine, they possessed a vast past, holding a terrifying status that ordinary people could not directly confront. And under the power of the spiritual flower, the space around them, disrupted by particles, was torn open with a ripple. "Go!" the old professor rasped out. Those few teachers' expressions darkened. Who didn't understand the professor's condition? This surge of strength, once used, meant he had few tricks left up his sleeve. But now was not the time to worry about that. Nearly several minutes had passed since the 5S rank burst out. They didn't hesitate. They moved swiftly, to obstruct them, to rescue the divine son. "Wait! I'm also coming." The blonde gamer was not weak, ranking just behind the youth and by Yilin as a first-tier fighter, and was indeed the fastest to kill the S rank in front of him. Now he was free to join. Bai Yilin and the others did not refuse. After all, although this divine son was doing some irrational things without any fear, in the end, they still needed to save him. The blonde took advantage of the particle passageway that had been opened, stepped forward forcefully, and followed the S-rank teachers up. "Go!" Their speed was incredibly fast as they weaved through the highway. "Some bad news." A teacher glanced at his communicator and said in a deep voice. The other S-rank from the Superpower Association outside. "They're all heading in the direction of the Divine Sun too." This was a war. They were all top combat personnel, carving out this region as the battlefield. Other S-rank had been led to different areas. But now, the other S-rank had abandoned their fights with others and all switched their target to the Divine Sun. Even though their people were in pursuit trying to stop them, the opposition was continuously tightening their noose. The blonde frowned. "This is problematic. This Divine Sun, why is he running around?" He had followed not just strategically. His primary intent was to make contact with the Divine Sun, considering the great significance of the Divine Sun's status. If he could save him, that would be a huge favor owed to him. But looking at it now, save who? The high-level battle from Organization X may have been crucial, but it was only a small area. Outside, there was a warlike melee, with nearly thousands engaged in combat. This Divine Sun, the blonde side, whoosh, their speed, thanks to a teacher's superpower, was astoundingly fast. "Quick! They're faster than we anticipated." After all, several minutes had passed since those S-rank had taken off, which undoubtedly made them frantic. Ahead, that must be where the Divine Sun is. The blonde looked toward a massive industrial park. Black smoke billowing continuously, many buildings halfway shorn off, some even collapsed. One could see numerous ordinary people's bodies. They were the abandoned, those who hadn't been evacuated from the park. Suddenly, an immense booming explosion startled everyone. "Over there!" Their expressions changed, and they rushed over without hesitation. The sounds of battle indicated that the Divine Sun was likely still alive. The blonde looked at the distant surroundings, where other ripples of combat were seemingly drawing closer. Those are combat personnel from other areas. They're converging here, but our comrades are chasing and entangling them. It will still take some time. Boom! In the sky, suddenly a large amount of rocks began to coalesce. That's... Teacher's pupils narrowed. The other side has S-level abilities. Over here too. The flames burning amidst the rubble erupted with a thunderous boom, shooting up into the sky. The high-pitched sound of sharp friction also resonated, shaking countless glasses until they cracked continuously. They've all burst forth with their powers. Damn it! Quick! Save the divine sun. Gritting their teeth, they growled and ran towards the epicenter of the attacks. But it was already too late. Terrible varieties of powers converged, exploding violently at the center. Ripples spread visibly through the air. Numerous plumes of black smoke even caused a small mushroom cloud to form. Their faces contorted as they shouted, "Divine Sun!" The blonde's expression darkened. He couldn't have died, could he? Although the main mission didn't provide any hints, his heart was heavy. With such a terrifying burst of S-level abilities, even if one didn't die, they were likely severely injured. Not to mention the other enemies that were steadily converging on this location. Amidst the billowing black smoke, their eyes shifted from immense anxiety to a gradual shock, looking astonishingly at the scene before them. Click, click. The flames were burning unrestrained in the holes of the ruins before them, the metal beginning to deform from the intense heat. And on the ground among them lay the familiar figures of those S-level ability users, all with various gruesome wounds. They gasped for breath as they lay on the scorched earth. There was one S-level who actually managed to stand up sturdily because his body was covered in crystal formations like diamond. This is Divine Sun. Be careful. That's the strongest defensive S-level. In his complete form, his defense is nearly impossible to break. The man growled, spinning around like a high-speed bulldozer, lunging at the Divine Sun standing at the center, while Su Chi glanced at the anxious group. "Don't rush. What are you shouting so loudly for?" Su Chi calmly looked through his sunglasses at the opponent's body strength. He had just tested his new ability. The opponent had not only withstood it but was hardly injured. This ability was purely defensive, and it did seem difficult to break through by ordinary means. Under their shocked gaze, Su Chi casually raised his hand and then took out a box of cigarettes. Was this some kind of special object? Although the Divine Sun's powers were only just beginning to recover, if he possessed powerful special objects, they could accept that. Otherwise, how to explain that after the recent attack only the enemy fell? But Su Chi looked down and said, "Sorry, got the wrong one. The teachers?" The blonde even widened his eyes. "This is freaking." But in the next moment, a faint glow shimmered behind Su Chi, with strange patterns flickering on his neck, and one by one, feathers floated gently behind him. Then, with a swoosh, they shot out. Feathers that seemed light and fluttery carried an indomitable chill. Puff! Everyone heard the sound of something being penetrated. "All done," Su Chi said lightly, touching the spinning man's body. "Are you the Vajra Diamond, little tornado?" "Stop spinning." The man was stunned, held by bare hands, looking down at the feather that, like the sharpest blade, had penetrated his heart. His life force was rapidly fading, just before he collapsed. He raised his head and stared hard at Su Chi, his eyes emanating some dark energy. "Divine Sun, you shouldn't be alive." Su Chi looked at the black liquid boiling in him, and the others around him on the brink of death were the same. "This power feels familiar. This is power you can't even imagine." A husky, powerless whisper followed. "Times are different now. Divine Sun, you will definitely die." Bang, bang, bang. Bullets spewed from the Desert Eagle in Su Chi's hand, igniting flashes of fire. Several bullets swiftly ended their lives. Meanwhile, the black liquid from these S-rank bodies tore and crawled directly onto Su Chi. Chaotic, thicker than those monsters, yet they've managed to control it. Indeed, it's the high-quality chaotic provided by the Abyss Church, and they've even suppressed it. Such a method, Su Chi had only seen in the hands of the previous Venerable. The black chaotic was about to penetrate his body and merge with him. However, Dark Star sprang into action, devouring the chaotic like a famished pet. At the same time, an ancient relic pattern near Su Chi's collarbone slowly diminished. After stepping into the 7th rank, he could merge with another ancient relic and carve out a new sequence, as per the special traits of the ancient god heart. Therefore, He naturally chose Angel's Fallen Gift, an ancient relic that had shown its indomitable, powerful traits in the anxious land. Originally, Su Chi had planned to wait, but the evil god power within the spiritual eyes was disturbingly surging. So, he needed new strength to suppress it. Of course, the dangers involved were naturally not to be underestimated. After all, this was an act against the heavens. Ordinary people only had one sequence path in their entire lives. Thus, each fusion with an ancient relic, the energy bursts he would encounter, the resource consumption of the sequence path, the dangers of ascension, and so on would all increase exponentially. 10 sequences. Each must be developed in tandem. Su Chi was treading a path unprecedented. No social security, no endowment insurance, obscurely rare, even defying the rules and attracting ominous attention. But he didn't bother with whether he could achieve it or not, since charging ahead was the way to go, and at worst, he'd seek out a powerful god for retirement. Not sure if the evil god would agree. Oh right, the Master of Destruction still owed him a heap of debts. Keeping track of it all in a little notebook, no problem. Click! The crowd had already charged over, stepping on the ruins. Divine Son! A teacher's expression remained grave. After all, even though the Divine Son was unharmed, the trouble was far from over, and he said with a heavy voice, "Quick, come with us. There are others approaching. We'll help you break out. Escape from this place." The blonde-haired gamer couldn't help but scrutinize the Divine Son, a legend standing before them. Divine Sons, from ancient to modern times, were always heaven's chosen sons, looking down upon countless people as second-generation gods. And of course, there were others, exceptionally bright, leading their people. But this one was different from what he had imagined, wearing sunglasses, different from the urgency of the others. Instead, he was calmly looking into the distance. Do you think you can escape with the Superpower Association's strength, the transactions that support it, and this spreading power? The teacher's eyes followed Su Chi's gaze into the distance. Their expressions changed. When had the sky become darker than before? Oppressive thunderclouds looming overhead, with waves of dark energy roiling within. Is this a special object? No. But it seems to carry that dangerous power. Their pupils trembled slightly. What do we do now? Su Chi adjusted his sunglasses, allowing a glimpse of the spiritual eyes, watching that peculiar power swirling in the sky dome. Ordinary people know to buy full equipment, buff up and wait for the raid. The Superpower Association has been preparing for this day for a long time, naturally ready to ensnare you all at once. The blood drained from the teacher's lips as they felt an endless sense of doom pressing upon their chests, murmuring, "What do we do then? What else can we do?" He rose to his feet, stepping across the ruins. The noise was growing louder. People around looked astonished. Had the enemy arrived? So soon? But in the next moment, they found themselves at a loss for words as the combat fluctuations they thought signified the enemy were different from what they expected. Hordes of enemies were roaring. Groups after groups charged toward them, each one ragged as if they had survived fierce battles and were being pursued. And all around, is that? The blonde-haired gamer was stunned. It's our people. The teachers beside him were equally dumbfounded. Weren't they at a numerical disadvantage? Weren't their combat capabilities completely suppressed, making them the ones to be hunted? How had it become their people chasing the enemy instead? Had they seen it all wrong? And touching the teachers was the sight of a spirited young man at the forefront of their forces, charging ahead with his clothes billowing. He emitted an indescribable aura of leadership, clutching a military saber, surrounded by strange energy fluctuations. He waved his hand. "Follow me. Kill! Kill!" The crowd behind him roared in unison, their energy surging out, their momentum hardly showing any sign of disadvantage, but rather an unstoppable bravery. Crucially, those who were considered formidable S-rank superhumans were now being suppressed. No, it would be more accurate to say that they were being slaughtered in disarray. What in the world was happening? The remaining enemies retreated amidst roars of anger, While still having strength for a fight, they were utterly suppressed, their morale shattered. And the youth charging at the forefront, head held high, chest out, grew stronger by the minute, a mysterious aura swirling around him, his saber glinting in sync with his face. His eyes conveyed no more innocence or youth. Instead, there shone an undeniable brilliance, accompanied by an almost imperceptible air of superiority. Is this the divine son? Su Qi looked over, naturally inheriting the bloodline of a god. Duan was no mere boy next door. With the awakening of his power, his true self, the power in his blood, and the inherent aura of a superior being, all began to emerge. The blond man watched, glancing again at his main mission. Had he misunderstood? It felt like this man right here embodies the might of the divine son. Looking at Su Qi, who was lazily squatting on the ruins, pulling out a pack of cigarettes, seemingly searching for something. While the true divine son, Duan, led everyone to crush the enemy, his momentum soaring like a rainbow, he stood firm before Su Qi. Brother Su, we did as you commanded. Duan's voice was hoarse but steady, with a sharp, cutting edge. Su Qi squatted on the ground and nodded slightly. Well done. What should we do next? Duan asked for new instructions. Although he had just led everyone through a battle with his commanding leadership, he couldn't help but ask for Su Qi's plans. Don't rush. Su Qi, among the charred ruins, lit up a cigarette. Just like the first gunshot before every resistance, the first resounding bugle before every counteroffensive, we also need a symbolic monumental moment. He slowly raised the cigarette, tiny sparks mingling with the smoke. Now, everyone, listen. What comes next will be the fiercest battle, marking the final act that will determine the fate of this world. No one knows how much power the Superpower Association still has up their sleeves. No one is clear about who will win this war. Though I'd love to offer some inspiring words, sorry. Su Qi looked at everyone. There is no myth that good always prevails over evil. No story where the righteous order necessarily wins. It's solely up to us to strive to fight. If we fail, like these fleeting sparks, we'll be crushed in midair. And if we succeed, everyone watched the cigarette in Su Qi's hand. Su Qi threw the cigarette toward the sky dome, raising his arm, his Desert Eagle trigger ready at his finger. Bang! The bullet whistled through the air, striking the thrown cigarette high in the air. And the next moment, the cigarette exploded violently. Countless dazzling sparks, like a galaxy, completely scattered. The whole ruin was illuminated by countless sparks. Everyone's eyes shimmered brilliantly. We are the fires that spread across the field. Countless people stared dumbfounded at this scene. And Duan, too, stared blankly at the sky full of sparks, his eyes showing a mix of complexities, as if he was regaining some persona. But he gripped his saber firmly, heeding Su Qi's call. Everyone, move out. At this moment, the battle that erupted in the sealed battlefield was entering its most intense phase. To be precise, Group X's people were bursting forth with all their might, while the Superpower 7 still had plenty of reserve. Above the Sky Dome, the standoff between the two priests was also shifting. The old professor was already forced into a defensive position, his power of the soul being repeatedly penetrated by the opponent's power, narrowly avoiding being broken. Boom! The white-haired priest raised his hand, his white hair fluttering, his expression calm and indifferent, various powers bursting from his fingertips. After all, his power was to deprive others of their power. Still got the strength to resist, my friend. The old professor was bruised all over, his eyes white, with a defensive formation formed by the spiritual flower behind him. I, he rasped, am not your friend. Tisk. We used to get along quite well. The white-haired priest chuckled softly. Working together, protecting together, advancing the will of God and leading his people. Although the old professor was suppressed, his cold gaze remained unchanged. If I had known you had harbored betrayal and premeditation, I would have used all my power to kill you back then, before awakening in that ancient era. They had suffered severe injuries, teetering on the brink of death. They supported each other and stabilized the world, then chose to fall into a deep slumber. But little did he know that the other had cunningly reserved a portion of his strength and awakened earlier. He had turned the world into what it was now. Moreover, he had made a deal with dangerous and terrifying powers. This was undoubtedly a huge taboo for both him and the divine. Why would you do this? The white-haired priest effortlessly blocked the other's mind, burst with a wave of his hand. When the Lord Divine was last suppressed, I was there. You don't know what I saw. I saw endless terrifying black shadows, endless bizarre strength. The abyss merely revealed a corner. At that moment my heart was filled with boundless fear and despair, informing me that this was an unbeatable giant. So, I decided. He stretched out his hand, his thin arm breaking through his sleeve, revealing the pattern of the abyss believers. To devote everything to them, not just to survive but also to become the winner of the future. The old professor had no words left. All his strength burst forth, clearly unable to contain his rage. Of course now, the white-haired priest chuckled lightly. Anything you say is too late. We are all candles in the wind. Only by doing the right thing can we burn longer. And sorry, old pal, you and your ex-organization will be the first diminishing flames to extinguish. The white-haired elder stretched out his hand and shattered the professor's strength with a thunderous strike. At the same time, the ring on his finger was gleaming and seemed to connect with the particle storm in the sky dome, with ripples constantly forming. The professor barely stabilized his figure, his eyes heavily looking at the surrounding ripples. You have no idea what we've prepared. What breakout delay. Using leftover special objects to open the situation. Your secret trump cards, in my eyes, are just pointless struggles. Among the ripples, a vast number of dark, you creatures were growling and roaring as they surged densely from the mountains. And at the same time, there were also powerful dark walkers with deep, cold, ruthless eyes, wielding bone-cutting knives, looking at everyone. People on the battlefield were shocked by their surroundings. It's all creatures, all those made from potions. One teacher felt a sink in his heart. The bearded man understood better what this was. Support from the force that exists within the Abyss Church. These damned beasts, he roared, wanting to strike at his opponents. But the opponents just wouldn't give him the chance to erupt into combat. The creature's screams spread all around. Not just in this area, from various cities' hidden industrial parks, underground research labs. At this very moment all were opening, and lots of ripples were connecting with them. Creatures from all over were flooding in here through the ripples. The white-haired priest looked at the shocked, despairing eyes of the old professor, his smile growing broader. To see you, centered with spirit, making such a face, is truly rare. Now, do you understand? In front of true immense power, everything is but a futile effort. Just like the divine son, the white-haired elder lightly said. Is it his strength recovery, power recovery, that has allowed him to survive until now? No, his indifferent smile carried cruelty. It's just that I haven't gotten around to killing him yet. At that moment, a thunderous explosion sounded off in the tunnel. The rushing creatures were blown away. A car sped, trampling over the limbs of the creatures. Through the highway tunnel, a beautiful drift. The car door opened. Su Chi was wearing sunglasses with an RPG on his shoulder. That white-haired old devil. Who did you just say you were going to kill? Everyone was shocked. Divine Son. And Bai Yilin was even more shocked, her eyes widening. Su. Brother Su. Bai Yilin was somewhat confused. But just now he managed to hold back and didn't call out Su Chi's full name. To tell the truth, since entering this instance he had encountered many difficult points, such as changes and descriptions in the main storyline, the hidden superpower association, and the eerie chaotic mess. But these were not the focus. His biggest question was, where had Su Buxian, the sect hierarch of the Hustlers Club he joined, the one who said he would help him score points, gone? Even halfway through, he had begun to suspect that Su Buxian might have gone offline. Otherwise, Why were all the other people there at the start, and only Su Buxian was somewhere else? And now, all the previous guesses were void, because Su Buxian had appeared, and not only that, he seemed unsurprised by everything happening here, and had even fished out an RPG from who knows where and blown away the surrounding monsters. That's not right. Wait. Bai Yilan suddenly calmed down, looking at everyone, his pupils trembling slightly. What you just called him was Divine Son? By this point, everyone had already taken their positions, and the people from the Superpower Association were not in a hurry to make a move, as they now had full control of the situation. With a large number of monsters spreading across the area, they only needed to check for any gaps and prevent any counterattacks. Don't you know? Oh, I remember now. You indeed haven't seen the Divine Son's picture. The silver-haired woman panted. This is our Divine Son. Bai Yilan's eyes widened. You call him the Divine Son? What on earth has our sect hierarch been doing all this time? The youth also landed on the ground at this moment, listening to the two's conversation, and looking puzzledly at Bai Yilan, whose eyelids were twitching slightly. Brother Bai, what were you just yelling about? He hadn't heard clearly because the roar of the air in the sky. He only saw Bai Yilan's face change a bit. It's nothing. Bai Yilan let out a light sigh, swallowing down many questions. Be careful. The monsters are already pouncing on us. Some were already attacking at the forefront, nearing their range. Of course, before they even got close, the bearded man and the others calmly activated their powers and easily suppressed and killed these monsters. Their strength was naturally top-notch, extraordinary, so these monsters weren't a threat. The real danger was their numbers, and among them, the Dark Walkers. Bai Yilan's expression also quickly steadied. Although he had many questions, the answer the silver-haired woman had just given told him what to do, which was not to expose this matter. Boom, boom, boom. The high-speed rotating disc in the sky dome, with a large number of particles vibrating. And within it, a blue spherical object was revolving. It started. The silver-haired woman stared intently at the thing above. What is that? The youth couldn't help but ask. This is the special object we talked about earlier, controlled by that person. The silver-haired woman looked towards the ripples in the sky dome, obviously referring to the white-haired elder. It's just like our old professor's mind enhancement room. His power is also enhanced under this disc. The youth was taken aback for a moment. Then what is the opponent's power? Deprive power. These 4 words made the expressions of all the players change. This is too twisted. To strip away others' abilities and use them for oneself. The bearded man, however, said in a grave tone. Of course, there are many limitations. The opponent can't control everything. Right now, it has only caused a suppressing effect. In the upcoming battles, we need to fight these monsters and also be wary. If we are hit by the blue particle magnetic storm and fail to escape in time, our powers will be stripped away. And you do not belong to this world, are not bound by the world's rules, and have different kinds of strength in your sequences. So for him to strip and suppress, it certainly won't be easy. The silver-haired woman looked at them. So, everyone's spirits sunk. Are you saying we should go kill the opponent? They understood the request, but it was different from what was agreed upon. The situation had changed too quickly. Originally, they were to fight the Superpower 7, with which they had a chance to win. But now, the target had shifted to the opponent's priest, the white-haired big boss, and the terrifying power of deprivation. The youth frowned tightly. He wanted to refuse. This was no longer a difficulty level they could accept. Even if they failed the main quest, they could escape using pollution processing points, as this world seemed to have become a genuine nightmare-level challenge they couldn't handle. Moreover, he looked around, at these dark-skinned monsters and other X-organization ability users fending off the Dark Walkers, which seemed to involve even more dangerous powers. Bai Yilan naturally assessed the current situation instantaneously. Although the rewards were rich, and there was the Divine Son and God's treasury, the success rate was too low. Once the decision to stay was made, there would be no chance to leave. However, he suddenly, because the bearded man hoarsely shook his head.
No.
That's not what we mean. He looked up at the white-haired elder and the blue particle explosion sphere in the sky dome. We will all go stop him. And you! The bearded man looked toward the youth and Bai Yilan in a low voice. Mighty outsiders! I beg of you, use all your strength to take the divine sun and leave. As long as you leave this place, you will still have a chance. Players felt moved. The implications of the others' words were clear. They were prepared to unleash all their strength to perish with the enemy. Even if they couldn't kill them, they would create a path for the divine sun to escape. The key was, everyone's expression was solemn, resolute, their gazes unwaveringly steadfast, just waiting for the command. This world possessed incredibly staunch faith. I understand. The youth, possibly influenced or seeing a glimmer of hope, said gravely, I will do everything in my power. He paused, then looked at the players. What about you? The players nodded solemnly. Of course. They couldn't kill the priests, but there was still a slim hope of getting the divine sun out. Despite the somber atmosphere being emotionally charged, only Bai Yilan was silent. Players escaping with another player? Wasn't that exactly like their retreat plan? The thing was, each one was speaking so resolutely as if ready to embrace death. It made it impossible for him to speak. Roar! A cacophony of roars continually sounded as the fight raged on, with flowers blooming quietly around them. Wait for our chance. And when you see the right moment. Clearly, they had reached a consensus with the old professor who was battling the white-haired priest. The power of the mind was quietly gathering momentum, yet it was also the final, dying burst. Surrounded by indifferent gazes poised above them, the Superpower 7 were preparing their lethal tricks. Even though the situation seemed conclusively dire, the white-haired priest's orders were to annihilate the enemies with all their might, and no errors were acceptable, despite the apparent impossibility of failure. I see death in them, Hedgehog Head with white pupils murmured softly. It looks like death isn't far off for them. His eyes could see not only far distances but also distinct special entities. The Lord hasn't used his full strength yet, and their man has already been suppressed. Now he's at the end of his rope. The woman also looked toward the sky dome, in the direction of the old professor. One wrong step leads to many. If it weren't for the divine sun's disruption, they might have held out a bit longer. Although, in the end, it wouldn't have made much difference. Bald said calmly, after all, this is the power of divinity, the faith of this world. Their God is an order God, a righteous deity guarding with kindness and peace, which is why his people are so utterly loyal and devoted to him. And as a descendant of God, the divine Son who inherited his divinity, inevitably became such an illustrious, righteous being. Protecting, unwilling to let a single person escape, choosing to save one's companions. Heh! They looked mockingly at Su Qi in the distance, near the tunnel. It's nothing but a pathetic saint. At that moment, the voice of the white-haired priest suddenly appeared in their minds. Superpower 7, one of you, go kill the divine sun. The rest of you be alert, suppress their final counterattack. The Superpower 7 hesitated. They want to make a desperate counterattack, letting the outsiders take the divine sun to escape. The white-haired priest's hoarse and cold voice carried cruelty. They always think that by giving their all, sacrificing their own lives, they will see hope, but I must tell them, everything is cruel and hopeless. They won't have any chance. I'll go. Hedgehog Head decisively accepted the task. Although his ability lacked the destructive power of others, being a member of the Superpower 7, he naturally had extraordinary combat power, unattainable even by S rank, let alone an overzealous divine sun. His pupils turned white. His whole body flickered in mid-air. With each flash, he moved 30 to 40 meters closer to Su Qi, and he hesitated slightly, because, for some reason, the divine sun hadn't moved from the tunnel entrance since just now. And moreover, there was something odd. The monsters around seemed to avoid getting close, but Hedgehog Head, with his sharp eyes, had already noticed that the divine sun. His whole body was trembling. Is this it? Hedgehog Head almost laughed out loud. The expressions of the people from Organization X changed as they burst out, but facing the encirclement of the Superpower 7 and numerous monsters, they were firmly restrained. The young ones tried to rush over but were preemptively perceived, and their speed was noticeably slowed. Brother Bai, can you break through? That guy. He's already approached the Divine Sun. Bai Yilan silently watched from a distance. There's no need. What a joke. If the Divine Sun needed my rescue, then I wouldn't have joined the Hustlers Club. And now, Hedgehog Head had approached Su Qi. Divine Sun. I don't know if I'm right, but I've heard that killing certain heavenly prides and beings like the Divine Sun usually causes phenomena between heaven and earth. I really want to see that. Su Qi stood still, his face hiding behind dark glasses, slightly trembling, as if suppressing something. But he also replied softly, "It seems there is such a thing." Heaven and earth phenomena were not so mysterious. Some came from backgrounds and identities, like the Divine Sun, ancient bloodlines, special races, and some were Hiveli prides with extremely outstanding talents. The principle behind this seemed to be because of the path of series, where their talents are recognized by the sequence path. Once they fall, that entire sequence would lament for them. However, can you give me a couple more minutes? Su Qi said lightly. Hedgehog Head looked calm. Sorry, Divine Sun, but I am acting on orders. Now you can die. He no longer hesitated and had already reached Su Qi's side. His white pupils were changing like a white hole, the terrifying spiritual impact from activating his ability. Huge amounts of white phantoms were forming and ferociously charging at Su Qi, a fatal spiritual ability, possessing a deadly substantial killing intent. The ground was cut into powder, and along the way, the bodies of the monsters were instantly vaporized, as if capable of destroying everything, intending to annihilate Su Qi. But the next moment, Su Qi's body trembled, his arm very steady, slowly extended a finger to his dark glasses, and he sighed softly. He took off his glasses. Within the pitch-black pupils, the power of the evil god was raging wildly. The shadow behind him was flickering, a mere thin, translucent shadow, yet it seemed to carry an endless, terrifying breath. All the power of the mind came to a sudden halt 10 meters from Su Qi, instantly disintegrating. Hedgehog Head trembled all over, his eyes fixed on the eyes beneath Su Qi's glasses. What is this? Due to his ability of white pupils, he saw a boundless and unspeakable terrifying projection that only he could see. Awe! He let out a sharp scream, as if he were experiencing some indescribable pain. His mind tore inch by inch. Then, with a loud boom, his entire body bled from all orifices. His whole spiritual energy erupted. He thumped to the ground. It was unclear whether he had fainted or completely suffered a mental collapse. Su Qi slowly put his glasses back on, his body still trembling, but his expression was calm. I told you, give me a few minutes. A terrifying aura of the evil god lingered around Su Qi within a radius of 10 meters. He hadn't expected that just after emerging from the tunnel, before his cool entrance was complete, the power of the evil god in his spiritual eyes suddenly erupted, and it was more severe than before. He had to use all his strength to suppress it, which was why other monsters didn't dare to approach. Of course, when Hedgehog Head came over, he wasn't attacking him, but rather the raging power of the evil god. Naturally, it caused this terrifying power to return. If you had given me a few minutes, waited for me to suppress it, it wouldn't have been so tragic. After all, I'm not like evil god. When I act, it's always done gently. The mental collapse of Hedgehog Head was enough to know the boundless terror and the utter despair he faced. But we've run into trouble. The power in the spiritual eyes caused by the disturbance was also being suppressed by Su Qi using the Angel Ancient Relic, Ancient God's Heart. A large amount of spiritual energy, yellow robe divine clothes, dark star, and everything else usable. However, Su Qi was somewhat pessimistic. The strength of the evil god is even more vast and dangerous than I imagined. He wanted to slowly boil the frog, gradually taking control of the evil god's power. But the other party was impulsive, somewhat akin to an acute illness. Once it burst forth, it would be incredibly lethal. At this moment, he was fully suppressing it. This is the strength of the leader of the abyss. It really is profound. Each of the evil god's outbursts had Su Qi walking on the edge of a treacherous hell, and any slight underestimation would allow this force to take control, and now it was rampantly rampaging. If only I had known to have Hedgehog Head hold on a bit longer, just now that would have helped in sharing some of this force. At that time, the fall of Hedgehog Head also attracted everyone's attention. The white-haired priest squinted his eyes, watching Su Qi from the sky dome. Are there any remaining special objects? Body trembling? Standing still? Did you pay a certain price? Being a divine son, it was normal to possess good things. He wasn't too surprised. After all, they as priests deeply knew the strength of a divine son. They weren't a thing to fear, but what was most important was the divinity inside the divine son. This is the key to unlock the treasure of God, and also the key to establish contact with the sleeping divinity. Thus, the core involvement was just like that. The old professor leading Group X did not only focus on protecting the divine son but also on awakening the sleeping deities. This had been the mission passed down to the present. Stop looking at me. Su Qi, seeing various suspicious looks around him, looked innocently at Hedgehog Head lying unconscious on the ground. He fainted on his own. I didn't touch him. That's bullshit. Everyone frowned. Divine Son, the white-haired priest, holding down the old professor, looked over with a frosty gaze. Su Qi looked back at him. What's the matter, white-haired old man? Do you have anything else to explain? As for Su Buxian's attitude, the white-haired priest's eyes flashed momentarily. In his memory, all God's children were humble, gentle, charitable because everyone in the world followed God's sequence. This sequence, whether it was trials or anything else, leaned towards protection, justice, unity, and such. Under the influence of this sequence, most people maintained a just and kind heart. But as a successor to God, this divine son gave him a somewhat mismatched feeling. The white-haired priest squinted at Su Buxian. You're not quite what I imagined. It seems you haven't inherited the divine spirit's humble, gentle, charitable quality. Su Qi spread his hands. Who says? I've always possessed the qualities you mentioned. Bright, sunny, big boy has always been my label. And also, in the next moment, a cold gleam flashed behind Su Qi. Boom! The terrifying gleam exploded in front of Su Qi, and his hair near his sunglasses fluttered as one hand grasped the bald one's large sword. Talking while having your subordinates sneak attack. Have you no shame? The white-haired priest furrowed his brows. He was never one to hold back. If he could overpower his opponent, he would do so with all his strength. Just while talking, he also asked the Superpower 7 to launch a sneak attack. But unexpectedly, it was noticed. Everyone's expressions changed, looking towards where the bald one originally was. It was just a duplicate created by a power, and the woman clicked her tongue lightly, retracting her power. The duplicate bald one quickly cracked, becoming numerous dense little snakes, burrowing into the ground. Useless number 8. Couldn't you take him down with a sneak attack? The woman looked at bald one. Hold on. The bald one sneered. His big sword in hand then burst out with even stronger lightning power. Burst! With a loud explosion. Lightning submerged Su Qi instantly. Su Qi was completely engulfed by the lightning, to the point where he was not even visible. He stroked his chin, and did not act, because someone got angry. The power of the evil god, after all, was a part of Su Qi. Attacking him was also like attacking the evil god. Moreover, this force itself had no consciousness. It had only a single pure purpose: devour, annihilate, clear out anyone daring to touch this power. It naturally regarded the opponent as an enemy. Boom! The power of the evil god erupted once more from the pupils. Within the lightning, many couldn't see the scene, but Su Qi knew, behind him, the phantom of the evil god seemed to stretch out a claw, lightly grasping. In the next moment, Baldwin trembled throughout his body. He reached to clutch his own neck, his face instantly turning red as he stared with bulging eyes, a terrifying pressure seeming to fill his whole body. He tried to say something, but he couldn't say anything. He thudded to his knees on the ground. Young man's body is indeed strong, just kneels at the drop of a hat. Su Qi stepped out from the midst of the lightning. The influence of the evil god's power actually allowed him some freedom of movement now, and he could also take the initiative. At this moment, everyone had involuntarily plunged into a great battle. Although Su Qi used some unknown power to cut down two people, the surrounding area, teeming with monsters, was already pouncing up, and there was no other force available. The power of special objects, huh? After two people had fallen, the white-haired priest was still indifferent to the life or death of the two, but squinting his eyes and looking at Su Qi. Since that's the case, then the white-haired priest did not hesitate. The pattern on his arm flickered as a strange strength spread to all the ghost walkers in the entire region. Dark walkers, take all the monsters, surround and attack the X organization and the Divine Sun. His calm yet hoarse voice permeated everything here. The surrounding roars became more ferocious than before. All the monsters surged over in a dense mass. In that instant, everyone's pressure suddenly increased. Bai Yilan realized something was wrong with the state of things around them. It seemed to have become crazy, eyes also turning wild, and what was more important was the black tattoos on their bodies, which now seemed to be boiling like liquid. Every monster roared. More monsters were rapidly crawling over from the distance, their number horrifically dense. Covering the mountains and plains, the entire region is filled with these monsters. Everyone trembled at this sight. These beasts, how many people have they killed over the years? Although any S-rank among them could easily kill hundreds of ordinary monsters, the number now had surpassed any imagination, not to mention the presence of the ghost walkers. Even if all the members of the X organization gathered together, they would be overwhelmed by this endless horde. Is this their true strength? The people of the X organization, less than 30 in number, stood in the center of the region, looking at the surrounding tide of monsters like a flood, their expressions filled with despair. 1,000 troops and horses. Do you think you can escape? The blond man flew in the air as well, looking down on them, speaking calmly. Don't give up. Su Qi was rather calm as he kicked away a monster that was lunging at him. The monster becoming chaotically furious, madness taking over, and now monsters recklessly charging in. Didn't you say you would all save me and get out? Why is everyone's spirit so low now, lacking that desperate will to fight? As he spoke, he activated the reputation skill Word Spirit he had previously acquired. Title ability: Word Spirit. Type: Special skill. Effect: when any of your following belief, trust, faction loyalty reaches 100, your words can provide any arbitrary supportive blessing. The higher the progress, the higher the spiritual power, the greater the blessing. At the same time, the player's words will also provide emotions that are more easily believed. Cost: starting from 10 points of spiritual energy, will fluctuate according to time, the target's belief/trust/faction loyalty, and the emotions, strength, etc. of the blessing. Note: you have been strengthened. Charge. And now that everyone saw him as the Divine Sun, naturally the skill had its effect on them. People felt ashamed, helplessly lowering their heads, their faces filled with regret. The players also lowered their heads, then suddenly paused. Wait, what are we bowing our heads for? The youth couldn't help but, while fighting off the monsters that attacked, whispered to Bai Yilan. Is this Divine Sun a bit idiotic? Bai Yiling. He wanted to agree, but still restrained himself. Desperately, the woman twirled her hair, which upon closer inspection was made of little snakes hissing coldly. Struggling foolishly in the absence of any hope, the bearded man clenched his teeth, really wanting to burst forth and confront that woman immediately. But he had to admit, powerless, that what she said was correct. This sky-covering terrible number? bearded man's raspy voice emerged. How many people have you killed, and just how many dark dealings have you done with that dangerous Abyss Church? Does it matter? It's just a choice. One of the Superpower 7, the Blood Demon, also looked at the black liquid on those monsters. Under the true power, everything is nothing but flesh and blood to be crushed. Everyone felt a chill in their hands. Despair grew in their hearts. No matter the planning and strategy they had done before under such power, they saw no hope at all. The Dark Walkers tramped with heavy steps, their hands clutching huge various weapons, their patterns on their bodies shimmering, seemingly drawing other monsters into their own mouths, growing chaotically stronger. They were inundating everything around them, approaching the less than 30 remaining people of the X organization and Su Chi. Divine Son, don't you want to say something? This might be your last words, the woman said with a light laugh, looking at Su Chi. Then let me say a few words. Are you going to perform a comic dialogue? No, Su Chi said as he glanced at his watch, but then he paused. It seems I can't finish what I want to say, so I'll make it brief. He looked toward the Superpower 7. First of all, you sealed off this area with that disc, cutting it off from the outside world, making it accessible only from within and creating a complete killing field, ensuring secrecy to avoid affecting your subsequent world domination. Well done on that front. The woman, are you praising the wrong person? He then turned to the people of Organization X. Secondly, you've got a problem. Fighting a losing battle, you think you've made ample preparations, invoking everything at your command, yet you've overlooked your most important, most formidable strength. The bearded man was somewhat stunned. They had thrown every available force of Organization X into the fray, including the heritage left over in the school. What strength could possibly be left? But Su Chi slowly pressed his watch. They're here. At that very moment, roaring sounds began escaping from the mountain tunnels continuously, and furious winds whipped through the surrounding trees and mountains. Dark clouds were churning. On the distant hilltops connected by ripples, a multitude of superpower users burst forth with their abilities, flying through the sky dome and rapidly approaching. Divine Son, we've arrived. They were Organization X's S-rank and A-rank superpower users, including the teachers who had previously gone for the rescue. The crowd paused briefly, and the blond man looked on coldly. Is this the power you've been waiting for? A mere 20-something ability users were hardly worth considering. But then, everyone suddenly paused again, their expressions changing as they looked up to the sky. 3 combat aircraft burst from the clouds, with missiles and concentrated firepower exploding amidst the monster tide. Combat aircraft? Wait, there's more. People looked on in astonishment toward the distant mountains as rumbling noises grew louder. Helicopters bristling with armament rose from below the mountains in all directions. Each one was filled with people. Inside the tunnel was the clamor of vehicle engines, and a flood of armed vehicles burst from the tunnels. Countless vehicles appeared from all around. The sheer number within sight was overwhelming. It was almost too much to take in. What in the world? The blond man and his compatriots were puzzled as they viewed all the transport vehicles, for each one was marked with the insignia of the Superpower Association. And the numerous squads within the transports were orderly, swift, their movements well practiced as they quickly disembarked and rapidly secured a safe area on the spot. Every direction was swiftly cleared of monsters, and in the midst of the gory fray, it was clear these people had rich combat experience, seemingly having faced all kinds of dangers. They are squads from the Superpower Association, murmured the bearded man as he watched the numerous people in uniform. A voice rang out. To be precise, the C-rank and B-rank squads. The vehicle parked behind Su Chi disgorged its occupants, with the former captain stepping down and approaching Su Chi, stating calmly and his voice carrying across the entire combat zone. All the lower-level squads of the Superpower Association stand before the most perilous tasks, having fought countless battles to reach where they are today. And you? The captain spoke with conviction, his gaze ice-cold as he looked at the Superpower 7 and other ability users in the distance. Look down on these lower-level ability users, treating them as expendable pawns. He stretched out his hand, gripping the badge of the Superpower Association, and crushed it forcefully. Yet they are the most loyal, the bravest guardians of this world.